Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Is there something wrong with this world? On the edge of the god of war palace, on Olympus, Ares, Zeus's son, who had just been bestowed the title of god of war by the new god King Zeus, sat there in a daze, gazing at the endless sea of clouds in front of him, lost in thought. The lower gods and nymphs serving him in the god of war palace looked at him with concern, fearing that this violent god of war would, upon taking office, stir up a few wars on earth for excitement. After all, even before Zeus could lead the gods of Olympus to defeat Cronus and his supporters on Mount Othrys, Zeus's son Ares had already been born. In that era, Ares's bloodlust, belligerence, and cruelty had already spread throughout the world on the battlefields of the War of the Gods. However, Ares was clearly thinking of other things at this moment. Besides staring blankly at the sea of clouds, he held a black crystal pendant in his hand. In fact, although his physical body was still Ares, his spirit had clearly merged with, and been completely replaced by, a spirit from another dimension. Two kinds of memories were interwoven in his mind: one, as Zeus's son, filled with the clang of weapons, overcoming obstacles, blood, and battles on the battlefield of the war against the Titans; the other, as an ordinary human, living a peaceful daily life on a beautiful blue planet. After staring at the sea of clouds for a long time, the constantly interweaving and chaotic memories and consciousness in his mind finally converged into one, restoring his clarity of thought. Then, this handsome red-haired god lowered his head, covered the side of his face, and muttered, "I just went to a sauna, and I actually turned into Ares from Greek mythology." After the two segments of memory and two consciousnesses merged into one, the newborn Ares finally gradually sorted out his current situation. He had only been in a sauna room at a steam bath for a while. When he felt the temperature drop and added a scoop of water to the stove, steam diffused, and then he fainted. When he woke up, he had already arrived in this world and become Ares. As for those bloody memories, they should be the memories of the previous Ares, the Ares born in and belonging to this world, from the Titan War. Withdrawing his gaze from the clouds, Ares lowered his head and looked at the black crystal pendant in his hand. This pendant was an accessory he had casually bought at a pawn shop back in his hometown. The price of this pendant was just street stall level, and it wasn't intricately carved with any superb craftsmanship. He bought this pendant simply because he saw his friends around him like to wear pendants like crosses and other pendants, so he decided to get one for himself to play around with. Now, he had traveled through time and space, and this black pendant had also accompanied him to the other side of time and space. Needless to say, the reason for his transmigration was probably this black pendant, 9 times out of 10. But why, of all things, did I become Ares? Sighing inwardly, Ares stood up from the edge of the god of war palace, feeling the powerful divine power boiling and flowing like magma throughout his body. Comparing his current state with the previous Ares's memories, he found that his power had not diminished in the slightest due to a change in owner. Now, his power was worthy of the name of a god. If he wished, even if he casually threw his weapon to the ground, it could cause destructive power no less than the nuclear explosion. As the god of war, he could greatly enlarge his body, making himself tall enough to fight Titan giants. He could also summon various weapons such as his flaming longsword, great shield, and spear anytime, anywhere, and easily ignite wars between non-divine races on the ground. However, feeling this surging power, Ares felt no excitement, for he already knew Ares, this god, very well. He is the god of war, combat, daring, civil order, and rebellion, a bloodthirsty murderer and conqueror of defended castles, a symbol of strength and power, bloodthirsty, gory, the personification of human military disasters, and later the guardian god of the Thracians and Spartans, one of the Olympus' 12 main gods, the child of Zeus and Hera. But at the same time, he is also the most embarrassing of the 12 most powerful main gods on Olympus. If one were to speak of the deeds of Ares, it would undoubtedly be a history filled with bitterness, humiliation, and shame. Although this god was the true bloodline of the chaste heavenly queen Hera and Zeus, he was always suspected by the king of gods of being a child born from Hera's infidelity, because Hephaestus, Hera's previous child, was weak and ugly. Therefore, Ares was never favored by Zeus. In his life, he was first deprived of part of his authority as god of war and god of victory by his half-sister Athena, and then suffered setbacks at the hands of various figures. He was beaten by his father Zeus, by his second uncle Poseidon, by his mother Hera, and also by his siblings Apollo, Artemis, and Athena. He had an affair with his sister-in-law and was captured by his own brother Hephaestus in a fit of rage with a golden net, then dragged before the gods, losing all face. Even in the Trojan War, Athena, through the mortal Diomedes, was able to wound his wrist. Except for the Spartans who always worshipped him, even mortal playwrights called him a despicable god. To be a main god to this extent, from Ares's current advanced perspective, it would be better to just die. I need to find a way to reverse this embarrassing situation, Ares thought. But at this moment, the sea beneath the sea of clouds in front of him suddenly became turbulent, and a huge whirlpool even appeared in the center of the sea, visible even from Olympus. Then, Ares heard an angry roar from the direction of Zeus's god-king's hall. Zeus! I didn't expect you to be like this. I misjudged you, you are no different from your father Cronus. This angry roar shook the sky, scaring the nymphs in the god of war palace into trembling. Ares looked towards the god-king's hall and saw Oceanus, the god of the ocean, one of the previous generation of titans who had sided with Zeus in the Titan War, storm out of the god-king's hall, then leap down Olympus and return directly to the ocean. In Ares's Earth memories, Oceanus was already a member of the second generation of gods in Greek mythology. Although he was not imprisoned in Tartarus and lost his position after the Titan War, his status was gradually replaced by the third-generation god King Poseidon. But in Ares's memories, Oceanus was still one of the Olympus' 12 main gods. Because Olympus was newly established at this time, Zeus had not yet had time to engage in his future romantic affairs. Important deities such as Apollo, Artemis, and Athena had not yet been born. Therefore, among the 12 main gods, there were still many second-generation titans who supported Zeus. At this point in time, the positions of the Olympus' 12 main gods were God King Zeus, Heavenly Queen Hera, Sea King Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, Prometheus, Oceanus, Helios, Selene, Hephaestus, and finally Ares. Apart from Zeus's siblings and children, among the current 12 main gods, titans like Prometheus were included in the list of 12 main gods because they had sided with Zeus's faction during the war. And among these titans, the most influential speaker was naturally Oceanus. As a second-generation god, in terms of pure divine power, he was no weaker than Sea King Poseidon. Moreover, his daughter was Zeus's first wife, Athena's birth mother, the original goddess of wisdom Metis. This goddess played a crucial role in the war. It was she who created the emetic that made Cronus vomit up Hades and others whom he had swallowed, bringing the two sides to a stalemate. If this father-in-law of Zeus were to get angry, even the current Zeus would have to curb his temper and speak kindly. However, Ares found it strange, why would Oceanus suddenly be so angry? So he walked towards the god king's hall. Of course, the current Ares was different from the reckless and idiotic former god of war. He wouldn't touch the irritated Oceanus, but instead found Prometheus, who was standing at the entrance of the god king's hall, looking at the ocean with a troubled expression, lost in thought. Prometheus. Ares greeted the future god who stole fire. Ah, it's Ares. Prometheus's thoughts were clearly elsewhere at the moment. Hearing Ares's voice, he asked distractedly, "Is something wrong?" Ares subtly leaned closer and whispered. "Why is Oceanus angry?" "Alas, this matter is a bit complicated." Prometheus looked up at him, then lowered his head again, sighing. He clearly didn't want to discuss this topic with a brute like Ares. Ares glanced at the clouds. Although the sky was still clear, some clouds looked unusually thick, indicating that God King Zeus was not in a good mood. He then looked into the God King's hall and whispered to Prometheus. Since it's inconvenient to speak in detail here, let's go to my God of War palace. There's plenty of space there, and no outsiders. Prometheus looked at Ares with great surprise. In his impression, this was definitely not something the crude god of war would say. This god had always been one of the gods on Olympus least aware of the atmosphere. But before he could think further, Ares had already grabbed his arm and dragged him all the way to the God of War palace, dismissing the nymphs and lower gods serving in the God of War palace. All right, speak. Ares turned and said. Why is the God of War so persistent? Prometheus asked hesitantly. Because Oceanus came from Zeus, right? His anger must be related to Zeus, Ares said. As Zeus's son, and also a great god on Olympus, I think I have the right to understand the reason. Prometheus looked at Ares, and his attitude softened. He nodded and said, You're right, you do have the right to know about this. So, after a slight pause to choose his words, Prometheus slowly began to narrate. Ever since the Yuxing vanguard, an extraterrestrial visitor, broke through the barrier of chaos and descended to Earth, scattering and separating the original divine essence. What the hell? Is this timeline a bit off? Ares, hearing this, quickly interrupted Prometheus and asked, What did you say? Yuxing vanguard. Ah, I almost forgot. It's normal for a third-generation god like you not to know. This was already a matter of Uranus's era. Prometheus thought for a moment, and considering Ares's usual intelligence, he decided to skip this matter. In short, you only need to know that that thing caused huge losses to all the gods at that time. Oh. Ares nodded, signaling Prometheus to continue, but at this moment, he was already feeling a bit uneasy inside. If he remembered correctly, the Yuxing vanguard was something that only existed in a very popular world in the anime circle of his previous life, and in that world, gods like him were destined to perish sooner or later. Ever since then, our God King has been burdened with the curse of being overthrown by his own descendants, just as Uranus was overthrown by Cronus, and Cronus was overthrown by Zeus. When Zeus became God King, Cronus also uttered a new prophecy. Prometheus said, the child of Metis and Zeus will gain power stronger than him and overthrow him, becoming the king of men and gods. So just now, Zeus, like his father, devoured his wife Metis. Metis was Oceanus's beloved daughter, no wonder Oceanus was so furious just now. Because of this, Oceanus has sworn not to support Zeus anymore, nor to return to Olympus. Prometheus sighed, Olympus has just been established, and one powerful main god is already missing from the Olympus 12 main gods. So that's how it is. Ares nodded. He wasn't surprised by this at all, it was completely expected for Zeus, that monstrous father, to do such a thing. Moreover, it was because of this incident that the most brilliant jewel of Olympus, Athena, goddess of wisdom, was born later. However, according to my past memories, Prometheus should have some ability to foresee. If it's him, he should be able to foresee Athena's birth, and he definitely wouldn't show such an expression. Looking at the troubled Prometheus, Ares felt suspicious, so he pressed on. Prometheus, besides this, have you foreseen anything else? How could that be? Hearing Ares's words, Prometheus smiled, trying to brush him off. All I'm worried about is the discord among colleagues caused by this matter. That's absolutely not true. You have the ability to foresee. If it were just Goddess Metis being devoured, you absolutely wouldn't be so worried. Ares pressed on, you've definitely foreseen something, haven't you? Tell me, Prometheus, and in exchange, I will help you unconditionally once in the future. This. Prometheus took a step back, looking somewhat surprised and uncertain. In his impression, Ares would normally never say such a thing. Tell me, otherwise, I'll tell Zeus that you're hiding something from him. Ares ignored Prometheus, even if the other party suspected, they couldn't find out his true identity. He was now the real Ares, so he threatened confidently, "You rebelled against Cronus back then, Zeus will absolutely not completely trust you. If I just tell him about this, what do you think Zeus will do to you?" As he spoke, Ares also held his shoulder, preventing him from escaping. "This! Alas!" Prometheus hung his head, finally compromising helplessly, "All right, I'll tell you, but you have to promise not to tell anyone." As the god of wisdom, Prometheus had calculated everything, but he never expected to fall into Ares's hands. Before coming, he hadn't really taken Ares, that brute, seriously, and the original Ares was indeed a simpleton who could be easily fooled by his words. Now Ares was controlling him. Unless he could break free from Ares and complain to Zeus first, he might be able to twist black into white with his glib tongue. However, he was not the future Athena. Ares was a god of war after all, and in a fight, Prometheus couldn't possibly be his opponent. So he honestly said, "I foresaw the future where Zeus is killed by Zeus's son." "Oh, I see." Ares was not surprised by this either. Although in mythology, the Greek pantheon did not end in Zeus's era, given the nature of the Greek pantheon, it was not surprising for Zeus to be overthrown by his own child. If the Euxine vanguard was real, the age of gods would end sooner or later, and perhaps the age of gods in Greece ended this way. Thinking of this, Ares casually asked, "So, who is this child who killed Zeus?" "He is a demigod." Prometheus seemed to foresee that terrifying figure, and cold sweat seeped from his forehead. "His name is Kratos, or you can also call him Kratos." Chapter 2, There will be no smiles in such a life. Kratos. This name might not be famous worldwide, but Ares believed that anyone who had been involved in gaming or anime circles would know his renowned name. If god-slaying could be called the greatest feat humanity could achieve, then Kratos had integrated this feat into his daily life. For him, killing a god was no different from eating, drinking, or fighting monsters. Others who killed a god could be called god-slayers and boast endlessly, but Kratos could not simply be called a god-slayer, he could only be called the butcher of gods. Moreover, if Ares's memory served him correctly, among the 12 great gods of Olympus, he seemed to be the first to die at Kratos's hands. "Oh, my god!" Ares now felt a bolt from the blue flash through his mind, as if 10 Zeus were thundering in his head. When he first confirmed his transmigration, he thought he could use the myths and legends he remembered from his previous life, along with the intelligence of a normal modern person, to live a good life on Olympus. But now, Prometheus, who possessed foresight, told him that the age of gods in this world was not only destined to end but would end at the hands of that bald Kratos. Ares felt as if he had just been born in the delivery room, and the nurse who delivered him had already told him his date and cause of death. A life like this would have no joy. As for the option of Ares starting from now to strive for excellence, work hard, accumulate strength, and then directly confront that bald Kratos in the future great calamity of Olympus. Don't say I can't, if you can, you go. Anyway, upon hearing this news from Prometheus, Ares felt that his way of living in this world had to change. To avoid dying at the hands of that fierce, bald villain in the future, he had to formulate a plan to survive. "Ares, so you can make such an expression too." Seeing Ares's current face, Prometheus sighed, "I thought the god of war wouldn't show such an expression even if he died in battle." Creatures that don't know fear have no future." Ares said, releasing Prometheus. "Don't worry, Prometheus, I won't tell anyone this secret. From now on, if you need anything, come find me, I can help you once without violating my principles." "So you're this kind of person, Ares?" After Ares released him, Prometheus straightened his clothes and looked at him. "It seems all of us have misjudged you before. But you won't tell this secret to others, will you?" A smile appeared on Ares's face. If Prometheus revealed his true nature, then in turn, Ares would tell Zeus about it. By then, as Zeus's son, he could just make up a few lies to smooth things over, while Prometheus would face the terrible punishment of the God King for concealing such an important prophecy. Prometheus was a clever god, he knew the stakes, so Ares felt very at ease with him. The two looked at each other knowingly for several seconds, then Prometheus also smiled brightly, and subsequently, both burst into laughter simultaneously. Ares patted Prometheus's shoulder, cordially seeing him out of his temple, but upon turning back into the temple, his expression instantly darkened. Although Olympus was newly established, and this should have been the most spirited time for Ares, the god of war, Kratos was like a heavy mountain pressing down on his shoulders. I can't believe I transmigrated to another world, and I still have to fight desperately to survive. After sighing, Ares immediately leveraged his advantage as a corporate slave from his previous life, reigning in this huge psychological disparity and focusing all his thoughts on the main task. What he needed to consider now was how to survive. Ares first set a few broad directions for himself. First, find a way to confirm exactly which cursed place this world is. Is it a mythological world centered on Greek mythology, the predecessor of the planet he transmigrated from, or truly a type moon world with the UCI giant gods? Although there was a great extraterrestrial enemy called UCI, Ares remembered that the Greek gods in that world should have been Cybertronian, but now he possessed fleshly divine power as a heavenly god, which did not match his memory. Therefore, he had to confirm which world this was. Second, solidify his position as the god of war. Only by becoming a great god with status could he find a glimmer of hope in the coming changes, but he also had to maintain balance. While becoming a great god with status, he should try not to attract the attention of other great gods, especially Zeus. Third, find a way to analyze the black crystal pendant that came with him. If this thing was indeed the reason for his transmigration, then as long as he could slightly understand its operating principle, he could find a way to directly escape from this dangerous world. Among these three broad directions, Ares decided to try the third one first. Don't you see how Joseph Joestar, the second generation of the Joestar family, traversed the world for over 80 years, and the secret to his longevity was understanding how to assess the situation? When encountering an unbeatable enemy, he knew to turn and run, which is why he lived so long. So, if this black crystal pendant could allow Ares to directly leave this cursed world, he would absolutely not hesitate and would choose to escape immediately. As for the cursed position of the god of war, whoever wants it can have it. Anyway, when the bald one appears, this position will eventually be handed over. Of course, Ares was self-aware, he knew that with his abilities as the god of war, he absolutely could not analyze this black crystal. However, on Olympus now, there was a great god who might have the ability to analyze it. Hephaestus, the god of fire, the eldest son of God King Zeus and heavenly Queen Hera, and also the legitimate eldest son under God King Zeus. However, because he was born with illness and a weakened body, hardly resembling the offspring of two powerful deities, Hera disliked him and directly threw him off Olympus. However, Hephaestus was lucky, he was picked up by the sea goddess Thetis and raised. This sea goddess Thetis was both the birth mother of Achilles, the demigod hero who would later become famous throughout Greece, and it was also out of gratitude that the demigod hero possessed so much luxurious equipment, all given to him by Hephaestus out of appreciation for his mother's kindness. Because of this, Hephaestus was always at odds with his parents. Hera and Zeus, these heartless parents, never bothered with him until they discovered that Hephaestus could forge peerless weapons and help them defeat Cronus. Only then did these two shamelessly bring their son back up the mountain and bestow upon him the position of a great god. Later, although Hephaestus reluctantly worked with the Cyclops to forge a divine artifact for each of the three brothers Zeus, Hades, and Poseidon, helping them defeat Cronus, the god of fire surely still harbored resentment, as his father god was actually no better than his grandfather. His relationship with his biological brother, Ares, was also quite subtle, which was why Ares felt some hesitation before going to the fire god's hall. Chapter 3 Hephaestus. As blood brothers, what was the relationship like between Ares and Hephaestus in Greek mythology? Regarding this, Ares himself didn't want to elaborate too embarrassingly. In short, if Ares in Greek mythology wanted to speak with Hephaestus, he would definitely put on his armor and bring all his weapons before daring to step into the fire god's hall, because if he didn't, he might fall into the intricate traps designed by Hephaestus. As a brainless brute, Ares had always only respected powerful violence and was only willing to converse as equals with beings possessing great strength. As for Hephaestus, who was inherently weak and even abandoned by his parents, he was naturally looked down upon by Ares. In Ares's own memory, the previous Ares had always looked down on Hephaestus and was extremely impolite. The relationship between the two brothers had always been no different from that of strangers. Fortunately, Ares carefully searched his memories and found no record of him sharing a bed with any beautiful goddess. This made him greatly relieved. After all, they were blood-related brothers. As long as things hadn't gone to the absolute extreme, there was a possibility for his relationship with Hephaestus to mend. The reason for the complete rift between Ares and Hephaestus was naturally a certain goddess who was widely shared among the 12 gods, Hephaestus's wife, Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. If Ares in Greek mythology hadn't found his sister-in-law's dumplings particularly delicious, Hephaestus wouldn't have thenceforth refused to meet Ares privately, and the brothers wouldn't have regarded each other as enemies. But she hasn't been born yet, that's truly excellent. After finally confirming this, Ares let out a long sigh, then summoned the nymphs within the god of war palace and had them fetch him 2 pitchers of the finest divine wine. To gain the favor of his elder brother, Hephaestus, Ares decided he could temporarily abandon the dignity of a god of war. In fact, Hephaestus was indeed worthy of such effort. If one were to discuss which of the 12 great gods of Olympus was most worth currying favor with, it would undoubtedly be Hephaestus. He could help Zeus forge thunder, the strongest weapon in all of Greek mythology, and also forge the trident that controls the seas and the bident that wields death. With him, it meant having an endless supply of various divine artifacts. Compared to Hephaestus, his wife Aphrodite was utterly insignificant. In Ares's current view, that vase wasn't even fit to carry her husband's shoes. Thus, carrying 2 pitchers of divine wine, Ares headed straight for the fire god's hall. Arriving near the fire god's hall, Ares heard the sound of hammering emanating from the temple from afar. He came to the temple entrance and found that the temple, which had been built into a massive forge, was already in full operation. From the massive chimney on the temple, sparks were continuously spewing forth, and the fiercely burning internal flames also shone through the various doors and windows of the fire god's hall, making one feel the intense heat just by looking. And near the fire god's hall, there were no nymphs serving as in the god of war palace. Aside from the lesser gods serving the fire god, those coming and going here were all Cyclops. They were the loyal servants of Hephaestus. Ares arrived at the entrance of the fire god's hall, where 2 Cyclops were waiting. Seeing Ares approach, they dared not be negligent and bowed their heads to greet Ares. "Great Ares, it is an honor to see you." Ares asked the 2 Cyclops, "Is Hephaestus working?" "That's right. During the previous Great War, much of the warriors' equipment on Olympus was damaged. Lord Hephaestus must repair this equipment for them as soon as possible." One of the Cyclops asked. "Lord Ares, are you also here to repair your spear, shield, and sword?" "No, I'm here to see Hephaestus," Ares replied. "Then I'll inform him for you," the other Cyclops suggested. "No need." Ares understood well the unpleasant feeling of being in the middle of work and then suddenly being interrupted, especially since his relationship with Hephaestus wasn't good at the moment. Currently, he had a favor to ask of Hephaestus, so leaving a perfect first impression on him was extremely important. Thus, he directly refused the Cyclops' suggestion. "No, I'll wait for him here." Although the gods of Olympus were immortal and powerful, they also needed rest. Even Hephaestus couldn't work for days on end without eating or sleeping. So when the starry night arrived, and the veil of Nyx, the goddess of night, quietly covered the sky, the flames within the fire god's hall gradually died down. Seeing this, Ares' spirits lifted, and he then asked the two Cyclops guarding the entrance to go in and announce him. After a moment, the Cyclops reappeared and led him inside. Upon entering the fire god's hall, Ares saw his elder brother, who was currently covered in soot marks, sitting cross-legged beside his anvil, his tired eyes filled with surprise as he watched Ares slowly walk in. To be fair, Hephaestus couldn't actually be considered ugly, but on Olympus, where everyone was a handsome man or beautiful woman, his truly ordinary face would indeed be categorized as ugly. His body was the same. Currently, Hephaestus's legs hadn't been broken yet, so he now looked like an ordinary Greek blacksmith from a later era. Ares. Hephaestus asked Ares, who had walked up to him, "What wind blew you here today, that you'd actually be willing to wait outside the temple until I finished my work, and even waited for someone to announce you and only entered after getting my permission? Isn't this standard procedure?" Ares came to Hephaestus's side, disregarding the ash on the ground, and sat down cross-legged like him, replying with a smile. "That is indeed the behavior of a normal god, but the normal you would never do such a thing." Hephaestus looked Ares up and down, then asked, "Ah, I understand. You need a favor from me, don't you? Do you want me to repair your weapon, or forge a new one for you?" "No, no." Although he did indeed want Hephaestus to use his talents and divine power to help him analyze that black crystal pendant, Ares also knew that such matters couldn't be rushed. The most important thing right now was to build a good relationship with the fire god. So he presented the two pitchers of divine wine he had brought, placing them before Hephaestus, and then said, "Actually, I just came to drink with you." Chapter 4, I want to learn forging. Drink? After Ares explained his purpose, Hephaestus asked in surprise. "You didn't hit your head, did you?" After thinking for a moment, he shook his head again. "No, what place in this world could make you hit your head? You must have something to ask of me, right?" "Not really." Ares shook his head. "To tell you the truth, did you notice Oceanus's movements today?" "What happened to Oceanus?" Hephaestus asked in confusion upon hearing this. "I've been working all day, so I didn't notice anything outside." "Zeus swallowed Metis." Ares sighed. "Oceanus was furious about this today and has announced his withdrawal from Olympus, completely breaking with Zeus." "Ah? Why did Zeus do that?" Hephaestus was greatly puzzled. "Because Cronus gave him a prophecy, or rather, a curse." Ares said, "Cronus prophesied that he would be overthrown by his son with Metis. To nip this possibility in the bud, Zeus swallowed goddess Metis today." "Is that so?" "So that's how it is." After listening, Hephaestus's face didn't show much emotion. He just said indifferently, "That certainly sounds like something he would do." Seeing him display that expression, Ares felt the topic had been brought up, so he naturally said, "I used to, always thought that you being abandoned by Zeus and Hera was due to your own weakness, but now I realize I was wrong. As Zeus's son, whether we are strong or weak, as long as we arouse our father's vigilance, then, before him, we are ultimately as powerless as lambs, only able to be slaughtered and manipulated by him. Who in this world, when young, can escape the control of their parents? Zeus and Hera, as our parents, not only failed to fulfill their responsibility to protect us, but if we displease them, we could be punished at any time, even losing our lives for it. Thinking about it this way, I suddenly feel some admiration for you, Hephaestus. Although you were born into a predicament, you relied on your own efforts, not on being Zeus's son, but on your talent, to secure a position among the 12 gods of Olympus. Perhaps, that is what true strength is. No one in the world dislikes those who speak sincerely good words to them, especially in the world of Greek mythology. Even an honest person like Hephaestus, hearing his brother Ares, who used to look down on him, now sincerely praise and even flatter him, outwardly remained calm, but inwardly, he was already secretly delighted. As a return favor, after listening to Ares's words, Hephaestus also wanted to praise him in return. However, Hephaestus, the god of fire, was not skilled in rhetoric, so he racked his brains, thought for a long time, and could only say to Ares, "Ares, actually, it's not easy for you either. Indeed, as Zeus's son, who among us has it easy?" As Ares spoke, he had already taken out 2 cups and poured a cup of divine wine for himself and Hephaestus. He handed the divine wine to Hephaestus and clinked glasses, saying, "There's nothing for it, as brothers, from now on, we can only support and help each other on this Olympus." Hephaestus held his wine glass, hesitated for a moment, and then gently clinked it with Ares's. "You're right," he said to Ares. That night, Ares and Hephaestus talked through the night over divine wine, discussing many things with each other. Ares fully utilized his experience as an office worker in his previous life, employing the methods of entertaining company clients on Hephaestus, with remarkable results. The god of fire was very happy with what he said, and the relationship between the 2 great gods also became much closer. After that day, whenever Ares had time, he would bring fine wine, find Hephaestus, and talk about everything under the sun with him, strengthening their brotherly bond. After a period of time, their relationship had become as good as that of normal brothers in the mortal world. And feeling that their relationship was close enough, Ares struck while the iron was hot, expressing his interest in forging techniques to Hephaestus and hoping that Hephaestus could teach him a little. As the god of war, why are you interested in this kind of hammering and banging craft? Upon hearing Ares's request, Hephaestus asked very strangely. Because forging can create weapons, chariots, and war fortifications. Ares, as the god of war, naturally stated his pre-prepared excuse, as the god of war, is there anything wrong with me caring about the techniques for forging war equipment? Hephaestus thought about it. It seemed that this reason was indeed not problematic, so he replied, "All right, anyway, I've almost finished repairing the equipment on Olympus recently, so I'll take some time to teach you." As biological brothers, both Hephaestus and Ares's divine power attributes lean towards fire, except that Ares's flames are more violent and powerful than Hephaestus's, while Hephaestus, the god of fire, has more easily controllable fire. It was also for this reason, and because his physical strength became extremely formidable after becoming the god of war, that Ares dared to think that it wouldn't be difficult for him to learn Hephaestus's forging techniques with his conditions. As long as he learned these crafts, he would be able to deduce some properties of that black crystal without troubling the god of fire himself, which was also the safest option. However, when Hephaestus began to teach, Ares realized how terribly wrong he was. The weapons of the gods in this era were by no means comparable to human mortal objects. To learn to forge divine artifacts, before fire control and hammering techniques, Ares also had to learn a series of very complex magical knowledge. Fortunately, after becoming a deity, his mental agility and memory capacity were several times greater than before. With Ares's efforts, he eventually learned what Hephaestus taught and successfully got started. In the past, Ares would never have been able to learn such complex and intricate things. Hephaestus saw Ares's efforts and was also very pleasantly surprised. Unlike the gods on Olympus who were arrogant and would never allow anyone else's skill to be stronger than their own, nor would they allow their skills to be passed on, Hephaestus was a rare talent who was not arrogant and was happy to share his skills. The forging techniques of later mortals were all taught by him. Upon seeing Ares so diligently learning his forging, Hephaestus immediately found his brother more pleasing to the eye and also tried to impart everything he had learned without reservation. After approximately 4 to 5 years of learning, Ares finally graduated from Hephaestus, the god of fire. Although his forging technique is still far from the god of fire's level, he can now easily forge some low-level treasures. Hephaestus's forging knowledge and magical knowledge have also been completely learned by him. Now, all that is needed is practice and experience. And after completing his studies, Ares did not delay. He immediately returned to his god of war palace, preparing to begin the analysis of that black crystal pendant. But at this moment, outside the god of war palace, a lesser god suddenly rushed in, and upon seeing Ares sitting on the divine throne, he shouted in surprise. "Ares, you're finally back! Where were you yesterday? You didn't even attend Zeus's banquet." "I went to inspect the earth yesterday." Ares casually made up a lie, then asked. "What's wrong?" "Goddess, he became looking for you, it seems something extraordinary happened yesterday," the lesser god said. Chapter 5 Persuading Hera. Hebe is the goddess of youth, who also pours wine for the Olympus gods at banquets. Like Ares, she is also the child of Hera and Zeus, making them siblings. By the way, she was later married by Hera to the formidable Heracles, the strongest hero in Greece. This means that in the future, that rough and powerful Hercules will be both Ares's younger brother and his brother-in-law. "Then quickly invite my sister in," Ares immediately ordered upon hearing the subordinate god's words. After he gave the order, a moment later, two nymphs belonging to the god of war led the beautiful goddess of youth, Hebe, into the god of war palace. Ares did not put on airs, he directly descended from his divine throne and went to greet her. "Hebe, my sister," he asked, "why have you come to me in such a hurry?" "Ares," Hebe seemed relieved to see Ares approach. She asked, "My brother, what were you doing yesterday? You actually missed the banquet personally hosted by Zeus." "Me?" Ares replied, "I wanted to train myself, so I went to the mortal world yesterday to find suitable monsters to practice with." "What's wrong?" Here, Ares lied to Hebe. In truth, he had been studying forging techniques with Hephaestus on Olympus all day yesterday and had not left Olympus. Hebe carefully looked at his expression, then said, "It seems you weren't doing anything for our mother, Hera. That puts my mind at ease." After speaking, he told Ares what had happened yesterday. It turned out that just yesterday, one of Zeus's many wives, the goddess Leto, entered labor and was soon to give birth to Zeus's child. Because of this, the relationship between Zeus and Leto was exposed to Hera. Ares and Hebe's extremely jealous mother, Hera, naturally resorted to her traditional art of persecuting mistresses. Furthermore, she had heard a prophecy from who knows where, stating that the children goddess Leto bore for Zeus would be even more outstanding than the ugly Hephaestus and the crude Ares, which fueled her jealousy. She dispatched her monsters to persecute Leto, forbidding her from giving birth on land. Currently, those monsters are chasing Leto, and the purpose of Zeus's banquet yesterday was to ask other gods to help him persuade Hera. Unfortunately, Hera, who is currently enraged, will not listen to anyone. Upon hearing the name Leto, Ares understood. This goddess is the future mother of the god of light, Apollo, and the moon goddess, Artemis. As for these two children, it's hard to say who is more outstanding compared to Hephaestus, but in mythology, they are certainly more excellent than Ares. For his own plans, Ares definitely needs to maintain good relations with the two great gods, Apollo and Artemis. Apollo can preside over important divine duties such as prophecy, healing, and music, and Artemis also has great insight into beast mastery and hunting. Once he establishes good relations with these two deities, Ares can learn a great deal from them. Moreover, the moon goddess Artemis was a character who appeared in a mobile game from the world Ares was in during his previous life on Earth. If this goddess is born, Ares might be able to confirm whether this is the type moon world based on her appearance. After briefly weighing the pros and cons, Ares said to Hebe, "I see. Then I'll go and try to persuade Hera." "Persuade?" Hebe was stunned, then exclaimed in surprise, "Zeus can't even handle her right now, how will you persuade her? You know our mother goddess's temperament. Anyway, the fact that goddess Leto is going to give birth is already a given. As Zeus's son, you wouldn't want us to ruin our relationship with our future brothers or sisters because of mother, would you?" Ares shrugged. As for Hera, as her most favored son, if I explain the severity of the situation, I think she should still listen. Since it was on his way, Ares simply had his nymphs retrieve the jewels stored in the god of war palace, and then went to the fire god's hall to ask Hephaestus to forge a beautiful brooch for Hera on the spot as a gift. After the brooch was completed, Ares took it and headed to Hera's temple. Ever since learning about the prophecy of Kratos' destruction, Ares had been planning his survival strategy, and following the custom of his previous life, he had listed 3 plans: superior, medium, and inferior. The superior plan was naturally to activate the Black Crystal's time-traveling ability and directly escape to another universe, making a clean getaway. However, this plan was temporarily infeasible due to technical reasons, so Ares currently had to focus his energy on the medium plan. His medium plan was to first establish good relations with all the gods on Olympus, becoming a universally popular good guy, and find a way to ensure other gods would not perceive him as a threat. Then, in this state, he would research a magic that allowed him to feign death and escape, avoiding perishing with the age of gods. As for the inferior plan, Ares felt he could imitate the savior Ukka's posture, offering his loyalty to Kratos when he ascended Olympus. However, this plan was not foolproof. While the old god of war in Norse mythology, who had cultivated himself for many years, might accept his allegiance, it was truly hard to say if that bald man, driven mad by the gods, would accept it. Therefore, Ares's current task of persuading Hera was an effort to realize his medium plan, and establishing good relations with the siblings Artemis and Apollo was undoubtedly the best opportunity. He arrived outside Hera's temple and asked the goddesses serving Hera to enter the temple and announce him. Soon, he received Hera's permission and entered the temple. Although Hera was currently seething with anger, she would not refuse to see her own son. Upon entering the temple, Ares quickly saw his beautiful and charming mother on the magnificent golden throne. Hera's beauty and figure naturally needed no elaboration. If this golden-haired heavenly queen were not a rare beauty in the world, Zeus, that old lecher, would never have been willing to marry her as his heavenly queen at the cost of sharing his authority. Hera's mood was clearly not very good at the moment. When Ares entered the temple, she was staring at a pool in the center of her temple. Ares subtly glanced at the pool and saw a gigantic venomous python in it, riding the wind and waves across the ocean, chasing a certain figure. That should be Python, the legendary giant serpent Hera sent to hunt down Leto and the siblings Apollo and Artemis. However, Python's situation didn't look very good at the moment. It encountered an extremely strong storm and huge waves in the ocean. Although these weather phenomena were nothing to a monster capable of persecuting a god, they effectively slowed its pace. This was Poseidon's doing. Seeing the goddess Leto being cruelly persecuted by the monster, the Sea King felt compassion and used his authority to block Python in the ocean. Of course, this was certainly the official explanation. There must have been instructions from Zeus behind Poseidon's actions, and the Sea King was just taking the blame. But surprisingly, Poseidon truly could bear this blame. Heavenly Queen Hera on Olympus could at most vent her anger at fourth-generation gods like Ares, or her philandering husband Zeus. If she dared to get angry at Poseidon, the Sea King would undoubtedly show her a thing or two without a second thought. Poseidon did not even fear Zeus, so how could he fear a woman who gained power by relying on Zeus? That's why the Heavenly Queen was so furious now. Ares estimated that before his arrival, she had been watching Python here, shouting, "Move! Move!" while raging ineffectually. Seeing Ares approach, Hera's expression finally seemed to soften. She asked indifferently, "Ares, my child, have you come to make this shameless woman suffer and help your poor mother vent her anger?" Ares hesitated, then directly knelt on one knee and looked up, saying, "No, Mother, I have come to ask for your forgiveness for Leto." Chapter 6, Chapter 6 White hair, big waves, silly and sweet. What did you say? Hearing this, Hera's anger surged to its peak. Her eyes turned red with fury as she rose from her throne and approached Ares, trembling as she said, "Ares, I am your mother. Are you going to betray me too?" "No, Mother, I'm doing this for your own good." Ares earnestly used the same persuasive tactics he'd employed in his previous life to convince leaders and sell products, first taking her side and speaking favorably for her. "Mother, please calm down for a moment and think carefully. Goddess Leto is not a mortal, like you, she is also a child of the Titans. Her children with Zeus will certainly be extraordinary in the future. If you persecute her now, you will be making enemies with her children in the future. What if she's a goddess? Even her father, Kratos, has been imprisoned in Tartarus. What right does she have to seduce the man of me, Heavenly Queen Hera?" Hera angrily retorted, "Does Heavenly Queen Hera have to humble herself before the daughter of a criminal? It's true that Goddess Leto's father supported Kratos, but Goddess Leto herself firmly sided with Zeus. And Hera, think about it, several of the 12 great gods on Olympus now are second-generation gods who once served Kratos. Can Zeus truly trust them?" Ares painstakingly persuaded her, "The children in Goddess Leto's womb have clearly inherited Zeus's power and bloodline. If they are born, Zeus will surely enthrone them as chief gods among the 12 great gods, and take the opportunity to ostracize Helios and Selene, weakening their power and authority. Offending 2 future great gods would be greatly disadvantageous to you, Hera." This. Hera hesitated upon hearing this. She was well aware of how she had attained her current position. If she weren't Zeus's wife, her name would never have appeared among the 12 chief gods. As a heavenly queen, Hera's power was not truly strong. Her character and qualifications as a goddess could not compare to her sisters, Hestia or Demeter. Even now, Poseidon and Hades among the 12 gods completely ignored her, and Helios, Selene, and Prometheus would certainly not help her. If, in the future, when Zeus cheated, not a single one of the 12 gods of Olympus was willing to speak up for her, then she would truly be unable to restrain her husband, only able to let him do as he pleased outside, unable even to get angry. But Hera, upon second thought, still felt a surge of anger. "Leto seduced my man first. As heavenly queen, why should I swallow my anger? So, mother, you're just worried about losing face, and I'm here to help you solve that problem." Seeing that the time was right, Ares immediately volunteered, "Today, you can continue to do whatever you want, and I, Ares, will go help Goddess Leto with the trouble she's facing. That way, I will have done a favor for Goddess Leto's children, and since I am your son, even if they don't like you in the future, they will give you a good way out for my sake, Ares." After Ares volunteered, Hera thought for a moment, then agreed to Ares's plan. Ares was her child, and in her heart, she unconsciously did not guard against Ares as an outsider. In her view, if something were to happen in the future, Ares would definitely stand by her side. Of course, whether Ares would stand by her side now was debatable. In any case, Ares certainly did not view Hera and Zeus as parents at the moment. The character of these 2 heavenly queens simply did not deserve to be called parents. And the biggest beneficiary of this matter outwardly seemed to be Hera, but that would only be if Ares truly obeyed Hera wholeheartedly. If Ares had his own ideas, then needless to say, the biggest beneficiary would definitely be Ares, who played both sides. He helped Goddess Leto, first gaining the favor of Artemis and Apollo, the siblings. Secondly, Zeus would also somewhat let go of his prejudice against this son of his. And Hera, on her side, also thought Ares was working hard for her future. By stepping forward this time, Ares simultaneously gained the favor of 3 great gods on Olympus. This was entirely beneficial to him, so after gaining Hera's consent, Ares quietly left, returned to the god of war palace, took his weapons and equipment, then leaped from Olympus, falling into the depths of the sea, arriving at the isolated island in the ocean formed by the meteor goddess Asteria. Asteria was Goddess Leto's sister. Because heavenly Queen Hera had forbidden the earth from providing her a place to give birth, this sister stepped forward and prepared a birthing place for her sister. When Ares arrived here, he could see that besides this floating island, which would later be known as Delos Island, 4 massive adamantine pillars had also risen from the sea. These 4 pillars helped the drifting Delos island stabilize itself. Ares felt a divine power containing thunder from these 4 pillars, which was clearly also Zeus's doing. As Ares looked at these 4 pillars, he wondered if it was his imagination, but he always felt a gaze descending from the sky, falling upon him. He feared that if he had come to harm goddess Leto on Hera's behalf, inexplicable lightning would fall from the sky. However, Ares's purpose for this trip was to help goddess Leto, so he openly withdrew his gaze and ignored the power and pressure Zeus focused on him. He walked directly into the depths of the floating island, arriving outside a solitary temple on the island. He did not restrain his presence, so when he arrived outside the temple, someone was already waiting at the temple entrance. It was a maiden, dressed in a moon-white gown, of great beauty, and from her emanated a new, and somewhat similar to Ares's origin, divine power. Although this divine power was not yet as strong as his current power, it already showed the nascent might of a future great god. The maiden held a divine bow in her hand. Upon seeing Ares, she immediately drew her bow and nocked an arrow, aiming it in Ares's direction and threatening, "Stop! Who are you? State your name." Ares looked at the maiden, white hair, large breasts, a serious expression that always seemed to carry a hint of foolishness. Indeed, it was undeniably that love-struck virgin goddess who forcibly squeezed into her man's spirit origin on the card. So he looked up at the sky, sighed softly, lamenting his tragic fate. Seeing Ares suddenly sighing towards the sky for some unknown reason, the nascent goddess Artemis was somewhat bewildered. However, because her mother was giving birth to her brother in the temple behind her, she did not relax her vigilance at all. Seeing Artemis's stance, Ares voluntarily took a step back, then released his grip on his sword hilt and spread his hands to show he had no hostile intentions. "I am Zeus and Hera's son, the god of war of Olympus, Ares." He introduced himself to Artemis. "You might not believe it, but I've come here to help you." "Why would Hera's son help us?" Artemis asked, disbelievingly. "Because I am not only Hera's son, but also Zeus's son, just like you," Ares said, pointing towards the temple. "In the future, we will all gather on Olympus eventually, and I don't want to be antagonized by you for such a reason. As fellow children of Zeus, we are all siblings, and I think it's better for us to get along well." Artemis hesitated upon hearing this. She kept glancing into the temple, from which came her mother's painful sounds of giving birth to Apollo, making her very worried. Artemis was born with the authority of a goddess of childbirth. Her divine power could greatly alleviate goddess Leto's pain, but Artemis was truly unable to feel at ease about Ares, this Hera's son. Fortunately, the standoff between the two did not last long. Outside Delos Island, the sky slowly grew dark, and a huge monster on the sea had already shattered the storms and waves raised by Poseidon, heading towards Delos Island. Seeing this, Ares turned directly towards the beach and said to Artemis, "I'll go deal with Python. Goddess Leto is about to give birth, let her give birth first, let her give birth first." With that, he disregarded whatever Artemis behind him might think and walked out on his own, arriving at the sea. With one step, Ares's body grew with the wind. After taking 3 steps, his body had swelled to a size capable of fighting the titans of old. Although even at this height, he was still just a midget in front of the titans who once propped up the sky. It was more than enough to deal with the giant snake python. As if sensing Ares was about to do something, the storms and waves on the ocean quietly receded. Losing the natural disaster that blocked its way, the venomous python's speed increased. It rode the wind and waves, and in less than 2 minutes, it had already arrived near Delos Island. Its huge body was half submerged in the sea, half standing upright on the water. On its black, inverted triangular head, Python's fierce eyes were tightly fixed on the tall god of war blocking its path, its eyes filled with confusion. It had been ordered by Hera to come and kill goddess Leto, but now the god of war, Hera's son, stood in its way, preventing it from acting. However, Ares paid no attention to the confused python. Upon seeing the monster stop, he had already summoned his spear, raised his divine shield, and prepared for battle. Chapter 7 Kill Python. Facing the giant serpent python, although Ares knew his strength far surpassed this monster, he still dared not be careless. Python's threat to the gods never lay in its power, but in the potent venom contained within its body. If bitten, even Ares would not feel good. He had never battled snake-like creatures before, both in Ares's memories and his own. Fights were mostly against humanoid beings. However, Ares used to enjoy watching wilderness survival streamers teach people how to deal with snakes in the wild, especially one known as the Snake Man. His exquisite skill and extraordinary courage left a deep impression on Ares. And from his snake-catching techniques, the current Ares could now leverage the authority of the god of war to extrapolate many useful moves. Although Python itself was not a snake that could be born in nature, but a great serpent that only existed in the age of gods, its venom could even be directly sprayed from its mouth as a toxic mist to attack opponents. However, its body structure was generally similar to that of snakes. This meant that as long as its head was restrained, Python's inherent strength was not to be feared. This giant python could not defeat Ares with its physical power. Currently, Ares did not have a specialized snake-catching tongue, so he used his spear instead. The flaming spearhead, held in his hand, continuously swayed in front of Python's eyes, attempting to distract it. Sensing the god of war's hostility, the giant serpent python also became enraged. In the age of gods, these monsters, which walked the earth alongside the deities, were not particularly afraid of the gods. If it were the three great god kings or heavenly queen Hera, Python might retreat, but Ares was merely a fourth-generation god. Neither his seniority nor his reputation could make Python feel threatened. Therefore, this giant serpent also raised its upper body, its body expansion, and hissed, flicking its tongue, signaling an attack on Ares. Seeing Python in this state, Ares knew it was about to attack, so he became extremely vigilant. He continued to use his spear to lure and distract Python, while his other hand clenched his shield, holding it upright by his side, ready to block Python's attack at any moment. Being just a monster, Python was also an impatient and ferocious creature. Ignoring Ares's flaming spear, it suddenly raised its head, and its entire upper body shot towards Ares like an arrow released from a bowstring. Mid-air, it opened its massive maw, revealing its two enormous fangs, and two streams of potent venom, like water jets, shot from its venom glands, aiming for Ares's face. Fortunately, Ares was well prepared. As he raised his shield, he activated his divine power, and the monstrous face on the shield opened its mouth wide, spewing forth a raging sea of fire that instantly evaporated the venom Python sprayed in mid-air. Subsequently, his other hand did not pause, his spear swept horizontally, striking the side of Python's body, forcefully deflecting Python's attack direction as if with a stick. The giant serpent python bit down fiercely, but it bit onto one of the four pillars forged by Zeus's divine power. Ares used the momentum to spin around, and his shield slammed down onto its head. Taking advantage of Python being momentarily paralyzed by the residual divine power of Zeus on the pillar, he completely pinned Python's head against the pillar, sealing off its most dangerous maw and fangs. The waves churned, and the giant serpent python, sensing danger, was unwilling to die. It desperately twisted its massive body, thrashing in the sea, even causing a tsunami. Its enormous body coiled around Ares's waist and arms, attempting to hinder his attack. However, Ares had already gripped his sword hilt and drawn his flame sword. He activated his divine power, ignoring the giant serpent python's strength, and pressed the sword's edge against Python's neck. With a swift cut, a flame-like streak cut across the air. The giant serpent python's body fell with a thud, landing on Delos Island, raising a huge cloud of dust, while its head remained pinned to the pillar by Ares, separated from its body. Only after Ares confirmed that the monster's soul had permanently left its body did he release the shield, allowing its head to fall back to the ground. Phew! Seeing the dead giant serpent, Ares let out a slight sigh of relief. In a sense, this was his first battle since arriving in this world, and his opponent was Python, a monster capable of threatening the gods. Even though this monster would later become Apollo's stepping stone, Ares still dared not be careless. But he also couldn't leave this giant serpent unattended, because killing Python would not only earn him a great favor from Leto and her children, but also from the goddess Asteria, who had transformed into Delos Island, who would also owe him a huge favor. And this goddess Asteria, her daughter was Hecate, the goddess of night, roads, the underworld, and witchcraft, in some sense the most powerful sorceress of the Greek age of gods. To fully analyze the black crystal in his hand, Ares felt that Hephaestus's forging techniques alone might not be enough. Only by relying on this world's mysterious system could he hope to understand the black crystal's true nature. Moreover, since it was confirmed to be the moon world, if he wanted to establish himself in this world after the age of gods, knowledge of the mystical arts was indispensable. With Asteria's introduction, Ares might be able to learn true magic from the goddess Hecate. However, that was for later. To avoid Zeus's suspicion, Ares could only proceed slowly, step by step. He first confirmed the giant serpent's corpse, then began to collect the giant serpent, preparing to see if he could create a new noble phantasm for himself. In this era, the bodies of monsters were almost entirely treasures, their hides could be made into shields, and their bones could be fashioned into weapons, proving to be extremely formidable. However, when his palm touched Python's corpse, the giant serpent's body suddenly deflated like a punctured balloon. In the end, all the flesh and internal organs of the giant serpent completely disappeared. When Ares picked it up, all that remained was a snakeskin, a section of snake bone, and two fangs without their venom glands in its mouth. What's going on? Holding the snakeskin, Ares was somewhat bewildered. He blinked, then looked down at the black crystal pendant hanging on his chest, and detected a rich ether within it. Because the giant serpent Python died, the magic condensed from its flesh lost its owner, becoming ownerless magic, and was quickly absorbed by this pendant. Seeing this scene, Ares speculated in his mind. It seems this pendant needs energy to activate, but I don't know how much. Having understood this, Ares also conveniently collected the items left behind by the giant serpent Python. Although the flesh had been completely absorbed by the black pendant, these parts also retained extremely strong magic. After returning, he would find a way to ask Hephaestus for help, and he would definitely be able to forge extremely powerful noble phantasms. After tallying the spoils, Ares returned to Delos Island and reverted to his normal human size. Once he re-entered the area surrounded by the four pillars, Ares could clearly feel that the gaze falling upon him had become much kinder. He pretended not to know about this and walked directly into the temple in the center of the floating island. Just then, the temple suddenly glowed brightly, and brilliant golden light illuminated the entire floating island. Apollo, the god of light, god of prophecy and healing in later generations, was finally born at this moment. Chapter 8 Do the whole thing. Seeing the birth of Apollo, Ares did not enter Delos Island to disturb them. At this moment, he acted like a warrior who only cared about his recently acquired victory and spoils, perfectly fitting the persona of Ares, the simple-minded god of war. However, after he had packed everything using Python's snakeskin, Artemis came to the beach. She was not alone, she was supporting a beautiful woman in black, who held a golden-haired infant with a delicate, doll-like face. When Ares looked at them, he noticed that Artemis's body had reverted from her adult form to that of a little girl. It was clear that the goddess of the hunt had only forcefully accelerated her growth to protect her mother and brother. Now, after confirming that Ares harbored no ill will, Artemis no longer needed to maintain that state and had returned to her original white-haired lowly form. Leto, holding Apollo, and Artemis approached Ares. She then curtsied slightly, bowing, and gratefully said, "Noble Ares, son of Zeus and Hera, thank you for your help." "It's nothing, I just couldn't stand that mindless monster," Ares said, forcing a ferocious grin. Besides, it was a good hunt. In front of other gods he couldn't fully trust, especially under Zeus's watchful eye. Ares felt he still needed to maintain the basic persona of the god of war. Nonetheless, thank you again, Leto, as the gentlest goddess on Olympus, softly thanked Ares once more. After this period, Hera shouldn't send anyone to bother you anymore. You can live on this island for now, Ares said. Later, Zeus should send someone to pick you up. With that, he hoisted the spoils left by Python, bid farewell to goddess Leto, Artemis, and Apollo, and then ascended into the clouds, flying back to Olympus. As soon as he landed, Ares was invited by someone sent by Zeus. Upon arriving at the God King's hall, Ares finally met the king of gods. Perhaps to distinguish himself from younger generations of gods like Ares, he had transformed himself into a majestic middle-aged man with white beard and hair, seated on the God King's throne, which symbolized the highest authority in this world. Below the throne stood Prometheus. Upon seeing Ares return, Zeus immediately smiled and praised him. Well done, Ares. I didn't expect you to proactively protect your younger siblings. You truly are my son. Upon hearing this, Ares felt a bit annoyed, but he tried hard to show the hearty, simple-minded smile on his face. Of course, father, he said gruffly. I am the god of war of Olympus. Good, good, Zeus raised his hand and said, I want to give you a reward. You have Python's skin and bones, right? How about your elder brother Hephaestus forges you a set of armor and a new weapon? What do you think? Ares showed ecstatic joy and nodded, that works. So Zeus gave his orders, and Ares handed over Python's snakeskin, bones, and other items to a lower-ranking god nearby, instructing him to send these materials to the fire god's hall. During this time, Zeus also walked down from his throne. He approached Ares, intimately placed a hand on his shoulder, and then whispered. Ares, did Asteria not return with you? That old lecher. Ares, of course, knew why Zeus was asking this question. Clearly, besides the gentle, black-clad goddess Leto, he had also taken a liking to her sister, the meteor goddess Asteria. Now Ares understood why, even after the danger to goddess Leto and her 2 children was resolved, Asteria was unwilling to revert to her original form. So he shook his head and said, No, goddess Asteria is still acting as the floating island. Is that so? I see. Disappointment was evident on Zeus's face. His expression was overheard by Prometheus, who stood nearby. The latter quickly advised, Zeus, Hera is still furious. You shouldn't stir up more trouble now. I know. Zeus's face showed a look of disinterest. Clearly, he no longer had the energy to pursue a romance with the meteor goddess. He turned and sat back on his seat, then continued. I have seen it, my 2 children, Artemis and Apollo, both possess extremely powerful divine power and are qualified to become chief gods of my Olympus. Alas, the 12 great god positions are already full. Even if Oceanus gives up his position, it would only provide one more. What should we do? Zeus, Prometheus bowed his head and said, we can find a way for Helios to give up his position. Helios, indeed, Zeus said. But he is still the sun god, holding a crucial position in the world. How can we make him willingly give up his position? Ares, Prometheus, you two, do you have any ideas? He said, looking at Ares and Prometheus. Ares knew that Zeus was deliberately testing him. After all, this kind of task was clearly not something Ares, the god of war, could accomplish. Zeus could have just discussed it with Prometheus alone. But Zeus insisted on involving him, which indicated that the matter of Métis had made Zeus, who had just gained the God King's position and not yet secured it, uneasy. He probably now suspected every one of his children. If anyone showed potential to seize the God King's position, they might follow in Métis's footsteps. Therefore, Ares diligently maintained his persona, gruffly shouting. "What's so difficult about that? I'll just go and chop him down for you." With that, he directly drew his flame sword and, pretending to be serious, was about to walk out of the hall, intending to go to Helios's temple and chop off his head. Prometheus looked at Ares's retreating back, his eyes flickering, and he didn't stop him. Instead, he watched him with interest. Is he not stopping me because of what I asked him about the prophecy earlier? Finding that Prometheus did not stop him as he had expected, Ares steeled his heart and continued to walk out of the temple. If I'm going to put on a show, I'm going all out. If he doesn't stop me, I'll really chop him. Let's see who breaks first. Just as Ares was about to walk out of the God King's hall, finally, Zeus spoke. "Ares, come back. How can you do such a thing?" Ares stopped upon hearing this, turned his head, and stated emphatically, "Father, this is the fastest way. Come back when I tell you to come back." Zeus slapped the armrest of his throne, then pinched the bridge of his nose, somewhat annoyed. Seeing that Ares had finally obediently returned, the subtle vigilance in his eyes towards Ares dissipated, replaced by a feeling of vexation. "Prometheus," Zeus asked the god of wisdom beside him, his voice suppressed, "why didn't you stop Ares?" "Ahem, I couldn't stop him, Zeus," Prometheus said, feigning grievance. "Only a god king with power like yours can command the unruly god of war, isn't that right?" "You're right," Zeus changed the subject. "Then this task is yours, Prometheus. Go persuade Helios to yield his position to the future Apollo." "All right," Prometheus bowed confidently, clearly already having a countermeasure in mind. "All right, you may all leave. Ares, you can collect your reward from your brother later." Zeus waved his hand, then held his forehead, a trace of pain on his face. "I need to rest. Do not disturb me later unless it is important." Seeing this, Ares and Prometheus exchanged a knowing glance, then both assented to Zeus and left the God King's hall. Chapter 9 Purity. Too low. A few days later, Ares received news from Hephaestus that his reward had been forged. So, as usual, Ares brought 2 pots of divine wine, drank a few cups with the god of fire, and took his reward back with him. Since Ares already possessed the flame sword, the blazing shield, and a spear, Hephaestus forged him a robe made of python skin, a longbow made from python bones, and 2 daggers crafted from its venomous fangs. Because python was highly venomous, wearing the python skin robe would grant strong resistance to poisons, while the 2 daggers made from its fangs would infect enemies with python's potent venom. As for the large bow, since it was crafted from the bones and sinews of a giant python, only those with strength surpassing that of a giant python could draw it. This bow might not have the precision of those wielded by skilled archers like Artemis or Apollo, but its power far exceeded theirs. However, upon receiving the 3 weapons, Ares did not appear particularly pleased. He returned to the god of war palace, carefully stored the 3 weapons, then lay on his divine throne, gazed at the ceiling of the palace, and sighed. The purity is too low. He clenched his fist, and the divine power within him flowed like a mighty river. This power, in later eras, would be enough to instantly kill even ordinary heroic spirits, let alone magic users, with a single slap. But what was the use? Ares knew very well that his current strength was not his true strength, but rather a result of the favorable environment of Earth at the time. Ares believed that only power that could be wielded without hindrance in the age of Dharma decline, when the greater magic was severely diminished, or even in the age of Steel Earth, when magic was completely exhausted, only such power, in those desperate circumstances, could truly be considered his own. And whether it was to find such power in this world or to further uncover the secrets of the black crystal in his hand, Ares felt that he absolutely had to learn the power of magic. And not the magic of this era, but magic of a level that would still be called magic even in the future age of Dharma decline. He had already done a great favor for the meteor goddess Asteria. If he were to ask Hecate to teach him magic now, he believed that the goddess of magic would not refuse. The unfortunate thing was, judging from Zeus's previous probing of him, the god king had already begun to secretly be wary of each of his children. The nail that sticks out gets hammered down. If Ares were to seek Hecate to learn magic now, the god king might think he harbored ulterior motives. It should be known that goddess Hecate was an existence even Zeus was wary of. She did not take any side in the war between the Titans and the gods, but after the war, Zeus stripped so many old gods of their authority, yet he never dared to touch Hecate's share. In the post-gods era, Hecate's domain spanned the heavens, the earth, and the seas. Almost every domain of the 12 gods of Olympus had a share of hers. According to Zeus's temperament, this was almost impossible. The only explanation was that the mysteries goddess Hecate controlled were something even Zeus had to revere. If Ares dared to suggest to Zeus that he wanted to learn magic from this goddess, he would likely be deemed a rebel and cast into Tartarus the very next day. So when Zeus was about to bestow praise upon Ares, he instinctively and logically wanted to make this request, but he held back. To do such a thing, he needed a target that could attract Zeus's attention more than he could. Fortunately, it wouldn't be long before this dear target would be born. Athena, the archenemy of Ares, the god of war, a woman who, upon her birth, took away Ares's war strategy and god of victory divine authorities, took away Prometheus's god of wisdom divine authority, and various other major and minor divine authorities. She was undoubtedly the most famous of Zeus's children, the most powerful, the most beloved by Zeus, and of course, she was also the one Zeus feared the most. Once this daughter of Zeus and Metis emerged from Zeus's head, the vast majority of Zeus's attention would be drawn to her. At that time, Ares would also be able to naturally use the persona of this goddess and the god of war to do some unconventional things. Recently, Zeus's head had begun to experience intermittent severe pain. When he could no longer endure this suffering and invited Hephaestus to perform craniotomy on him, that would be the time of goddess Athena's birth. Only then would it be the opportune moment for Ares to fully exert himself and begin to vigorously advance his plans. Therefore, he now repeatedly reminded himself to proceed cautiously and not to be impatient. Afterwards, in order to train himself to be capable enough to deal with Athena, Ares also repeatedly left Olympus during this period to go to the lower realms and fight against the powerful monsters living on the earth at that time, honing his skills. During this period, the children of Zeus and goddess Leto, Artemis, and Apollo, also came of age successfully and were brought back to Olympus. Artemis took over the position of chief god left by Oceanus, and Apollo replaced Helios, becoming one of the new 12 gods. After another period of time passed, finally, one day, as Ares was returning to Olympus, he saw Hephaestus, carrying craniotomy tools, hurrying towards the god king's hall. Seeing this, Ares also quickly followed. Arriving outside the god king's hall, he found that the current chief gods of Olympus were all gathered there. However, except for Hephaestus, Zeus refused entry to other gods. Even heavenly Queen Hera was stopped outside, looking into the god king's hall with worried eyes. Therefore, Ares and the others did not witness the craniotomy itself. After Hephaestus entered, they only heard Zeus's somewhat painful groans emanating from the god king's hall. Afterwards, a powerful new divine power suddenly surged from within the hall, sweeping across the entire Olympus. It must be said that Athena truly lived up to her reputation as the most powerful fourth-generation god in mythology. Because she had already fully matured within Zeus's mind, her divine power reaction upon birth was already comparable to that of adult fourth-generation chief gods like Ares and Hephaestus. In any case, after sensing this divine power reaction, the faces of the other gods showed expressions of awe, while Ares's mother, Hera, had a face full of jealousy. Feeling the immense power of this divine power, Ares was also very happy in his heart. In his opinion, such rootless divine power, no matter how strong, was useless. On the contrary, the stronger Athena was, the more she would attract Zeus's hatred, and the easier it would be for him to act. However, on the surface, he still had to cooperate with his mother and show a look of disgust on his face. After the divine power reaction completely disappeared, the gates of the God King's hall opened wide, and Zeus called in the chief gods who were waiting outside. The gods entered the God King's hall and found that inside, besides Zeus, who looked relieved, and the somewhat dazed god of fire carrying craniotomy tools, there stood a graceful, armored, and beautiful goddess. She possessed a pair of eyes brighter than any god on Olympus, appearing radiant and poised. "This is my daughter, she is called Athena," Zeus announced, rubbing his forehead. "From today onwards, she will succeed Prometheus and become the goddess of wisdom of Olympus." Chapter 10 Touching the porcelain. Upon hearing Zeus's decision, Prometheus, the current holder of that title, clearly displayed the words "fuck" on his face. But before he could point at himself and offer a defense, he heard Zeus continue. "Furthermore, Athena can also govern military strategy, art, medicine, animal husbandry, agriculture, navigation, law, and music. Moreover, she will take my place in overseeing victory." After he finished speaking, Poseidon, the god of the sea, Apollo, the god of art, medicine, and music, Demeter, the god of agriculture, Themis, the god of law, Hephaestus, the god of forging art, and Ares, the god of war, all simultaneously felt offended. Several ill-intentioned gazes immediately converged on this newly born goddess, who had yet to understand her situation. At this moment, Prometheus and Ares, witnessing all of this, simultaneously understood something. They both quietly reined in their thoughts. The former took a step back, swallowing his words, while the latter, cooperating with the other gods present, also feigned a furious expression. Zeus's action was clearly intended to force Athena to offend all the great gods present, allowing these great gods to restrain her and prevent her from being able to scheme for more than she should. Judging by Athena's expression, the goddess quickly understood the meaning behind her father's actions. Having grown in Zeus's mind, she naturally knew what her father god usually thought. However, Zeus's move was executed openly and honorably. Even Athena could not avoid such an overt scheme and could only temporarily endure it, planning to slowly counter it later. She looked at her uncles, aunts, brothers, and sisters around her, offering them a friendly gaze, but was met with ill-intentioned and wary looks. This made Athena feel helpless, but because Zeus was present and Athena's divine office was Zeus's command, the principal gods present, though displeased, dared not express it directly. According to their roles, among all the great gods present, only one principal god was likely to defy Zeus's decision and stand up against him. Thus, the gazes of Poseidon, Demeter, Apollo, Hephaestus, and Artemis all converged on Ares. Hephaestus, Artemis, and Apollo, who had good relationships with Ares, showed a hint of worry in their eyes, but Poseidon and Demeter's gazes were somewhat anxious. Their eyes seemed to be saying, "Ares, why aren't you acting yet?" Feeling their gazes, Ares also understood that this was his stage. For his own purpose, Ares didn't mind performing. So, he silently brewed up some anger in his heart, then feigned a furious expression on his face, stepped forward, and raised his hand to Zeus, saying, "I object." As soon as these words were uttered, although the gods of Olympus were startled, seeing that the speaker was Ares, none of them showed surprise. In fact, Poseidon and other unscrupulous elder gods even adopted the posture of watching a tiger fight from a safe distance. Oh! Hearing Ares's words, Zeus did not seem surprised. He inquired, "Ares, why do you object to my command?" "Father, this is not fair at all." Struggling to maintain his furious state, Ares accused Zeus, "I am the god of war, I should rightfully govern military strategy and win victories for you. How can Athena just intervention and take what belongs to me? So, you wish to defy your father's command?" Zeus showed an displeased expression, but judging from the clear sky outside the palace, his true mood at the moment was not particularly unhappy. "I just don't accept it." Seeing this, Ares deliberately made himself appear like a character filled with anger yet afraid to disobey his father god. He feigned contemplation for a moment, then shouted, "Since Athena wants to seize what belongs to me, the god of war, then it's simple, let us use force to judge who is truly worthy of winning victory." With that, he drew his flame sword and blazing shield, and began striking his shield with the sword, making a clanging sound. "Wait, Ares, don't be impulsive." Hephaestus spoke up to dissuade him, but Zeus immediately interrupted him, "Since you are so confident, Ares, then come, Athena." He looked at the clear-eyed goddess who had just been born, and after a moment of thought, she nodded to him. "Good. Then let's decide Athena's authority through a duel." Zeus raised the lightning bolt resting beside his throne, held it high, and announced, "The location of the duel shall be the Mediterranean Sea." As his voice fell, he brought the lightning bolt down with a heavy thud, and immediately, a bright lightning bolt fell from the sky, splitting the waters of the Mediterranean Sea in two, revealing a large expanse of seabed land. Seeing that Zeus was serious, the goddess Leto, who had previously received Ares's favor, quickly spoke up. "Zeus, please reconsider. The gods of Olympus cannot fight and contend with each other like siblings over such matters. Leto, just take care of your own children. I don't believe my son can't defeat this little girl." Heavenly Queen Hera beside him spoke dismissively, then looked at Ares, "Ares, use all your strength and show them the power of the god of war." Ares nodded to Hera, then silently apologized to her in his heart. Having initiated this fight, he had no intention of winning. Only by losing to Athena could he prove that Athena's threat to Zeus was greater than his own, thereby making Zeus relax his guard and allowing him to act more freely. After Zeus announced the start of the duel, Ares donned his helmet, picked up his weapons, and leaped from the clouds, plummeting straight into the sea basin in the center of the Mediterranean Sea. Just as he plunged into the seabed like a meteorite, creating a massive crater, on the other side, Athena, majestic like a valkyrie, gracefully descended to the same spot. Subsequently, Zeus also arrived with a host of heavenly gods, riding on clouds. The group of heavenly gods hovered in the air above this duel arena, and then Zeus raised his hands, asking his children, "Ares, Athena, are you both ready?" Athena took a deep breath, appearing somewhat nervous, but she still nodded. Ares, on his part, naturally also nodded slightly, indicating he was fully prepared. "Then, let the duel begin," Zeus announced. Upon the God King's command, both principal gods took up their weapons. Ares's flame sword was imbued with his divine power, engulfed in roaring flames, while a mysterious aura began to swirl around Athena's spear. "Come, Ares," the golden-haired, clear-eyed goddess said to her half-brother, "I will prove to all that I am victory." Just being talkative doesn't make one the goddess of victory. Ares struggled to force a sneer onto his lips, while softly saying to Athena in his heart, "Come, Athena, I am ready too." The god of war of Olympus took a deep breath, then exerted all his strength, preparing to stage a fall against Athena. Chapter 11 Thanks Athena for magic. However, although it was a deliberate provocation, it was also a technical skill. If Ares had made it too obvious, it would have aroused the suspicion of Zeus and the other gods. He had to use all his strength, forcing Athena to use all her means to defeat him. Only by losing by a single move to the goddess of wisdom would it be considered a successful provocation. So, after his words fell, Ares immediately charged at Athena with all his might, showing no mercy. The war god's toes shattered the earth, unleashing a brutal force that even demigod heroes of later generations could hardly match. The land twisted and broke under the will of the god, and Ares's body directly transformed into a blazing fireball. Even a simple shield charge, when performed by Ares, was like an extraterrestrial meteor striking the ground. Faced with such a terrifying attack, the goddess Athena's choice was also very simple and direct. She raised the round shield in her hand, stepped on the ground, shining with golden light, and charged forward without hesitation, rushing towards Ares, who had turned into a fireball. With a thunderous explosion, the shields of the two main gods crashed together. The divine power on them transformed into an unimaginable magical impact, directly exploding on the seabed. On the sand that had been undisturbed for tens of thousands of years on the seabed, visible dust waves were stirred up, and flames and golden light rippled out, turning into shockwaves that violently shattered. In their first charge, the two main gods were evenly matched. As an experienced main god, Ares's divine power was slightly stronger than that of the newly born Athena. However, Athena was a natural pay-to-win player. The shield she held was an Aegis shield, similar to Zeus's shield. The two shields possessed nearly identical power, capable of fully defending against even Zeus's lightning without any damage. Ares's flame shield and Athena's Aegis round shield were locked together under the interaction of immense force, and fierce sparks flew between the two shields. Behind the shields, the eyes of the two gods met, filled with battle intent. After a few seconds of stalemate, Ares, relying on his superiority in divine power and physical strength, suddenly pushed, forcefully repelling Athena. Then he closed in, his flame sword already slashing violently towards Athena's head. The power of this strike was comparable to many so-called anti-city noble phantasms of later heroic spirits. The divine power on the blade directly burst forth, forming a 1,000-meter-long flame sword chi. Even if a city-state stood before Ares, it would be reduced to ruins and ashes under this sword. However, in front of the Aegis raised by Athena, this sword was still unable to penetrate the protection of the divine shield, returning without success before the golden barrier. While raising her divine shield, Athena's other hand also held her divine spear, which swept across like a golden dragon. But this combat technique was useless in front of the war god Ares. The two main gods thus engaged in intense close-quarters weapon combat at a distance extremely close for gods. The war god Ares, needless to say, and Athena had also inherited the techniques of this divine king in Zeus's mind. The divine power, strength, and armaments of both sides had their respective advantages and disadvantages, and the situation became deadlocked for a time, making it difficult to determine the victor. However, the observing gods noticed something at this point. Athena's divine power foundation is insufficient. If this stalemate continues, she will lose to Ares. Apollo, who was observing, whispered to his sister, Artemis. "Isn't that good?" Artemis said happily when she heard this. "This way, Ares won't have to cede his divine authority to her, and perhaps Apollo, you won't have to split off the divine authorities of music and healing." "Not necessarily." Apollo looked at Zeus, who was calm and seemed to be deep in thought, and Hera, who was watching Ares with great excitement, and then said to his sister, "Ares winning might not be a good thing for him." "What do you mean?" Artemis looked a bit confused, but under everyone's gaze, Apollo did not explain to her, only telling Artemis to continue watching. The fierce battle continued for a day and a night. Under endless high-intensity consumption, even in the divine era environment where ether permeated the atmosphere, Ares and Athena's divine power gradually faltered. After seeing the state of the two main gods, the gods also understood that the time for them to determine a winner was approaching. Perceiving their own and their opponent's current state, Ares and Athena both began to accumulate divine power, silently preparing for their final gamble. The weapons of the two gods clashed violently, and fire and golden light simultaneously scattered as sparks and light points. Their weapons also flew out of their hands at the same time. After his weapon flew out, Ares immediately retreated without hesitation. As he retreated, a burning spear appeared in his hand. He immediately used this spear as a throwing weapon, hurling it fiercely towards Athena's shield. Athena continued to raise her Aegis to block, using the Aegis divine shield's powerful, all-blocking defense to steadily block Ares's spear. However, while the Aegis would not tire, Athena's divine power and stamina were rapidly depleting. Her shield, while blocking Ares's spear, also tilted slightly. Catching this scene, Ares, relying on his war god's combat instinct, immediately threw the flame shield in his other hand like a frisbee. With a bang, the flame shield transformed into a fiery sun, violently colliding with the surface of the divine shield aegis. This became the last straw that broke Athena's resolve. At this point, the goddess of wisdom could no longer hold her divine shield. The moment the flame shield was parried, her aegis also flew out. At this moment, Athena was completely exposed, full of openings, and the war god Ares had retrieved a giant bow made of snake bone from somewhere. He condensed all his divine power into a blazing flame arrow, aiming it at Athena's chest. However, at this moment, Ares suddenly noticed a magical power quietly lurking from the ground beneath his feet. Is it magic cast by Athena? Ares understood in his heart. If he were to immediately give up shooting and dodge on the spot, Athena's spell would not be able to affect him. However, unlike him, Athena should not be acting. This goddess also understood that facing an opponent like Ares, she had to defeat him according to Zeus's wishes. Pretending to lose narrowly to him would be all harm and no benefit to her. Not only would she not be able to get rid of this persistent guy, but Zeus might also take the opportunity to weaken her. Casting this magic should have exhausted the last of the goddess of wisdom's divine power. This was her final gamble. If Ares avoided this magic, Athena would never be able to defeat Ares with just physical strength. But what Ares wanted was precisely this effect, this gamble from Athena. So he stabilized his stance, deliberately stood still, and even tried to charge for an extra second. A golden beam of light suddenly burst forth from beneath Ares's feet, engulfing his body. Because of this strike, Ares also deliberately exaggeratedly raised the arrow he had shot towards Athena's chest, causing it to fly far past the goddess of wisdom's shoulder, cutting through a large expanse of the Mediterranean Sea, and then violently plunging into the coastal bay, where it stirred up a huge, visible cloud of fire. And within the golden light, Ares, feeling the intense pain spreading throughout his body, let out a terrible cry of agony without hesitation. Thanks for the magic, Athena. As his consciousness gradually dispersed under the impact of the spell, Ares's mind flashed with one last thought. Chapter 12. Chapter 12. Athena, you are so powerful. When Ares regained consciousness, he was already lying in his own temple. His sister, the goddess Hebe, was watching over him. Seeing Ares awaken, she said in pleasant surprise. Ares, you're finally awake. Ares lay on the bed in the temple, thought for a moment, then asked, where is Athena? She's in the God King's hall. Zeus has ordered Prometheus and his brother Epimetheus to descend and manage the earth in his stead, and Athena has officially completed the handover with Prometheus, taking over his position as god of wisdom. After Hebe finished speaking, she carefully glanced at him, then softly said, Ares, don't be angry. Zeus has ruled that Athena won your duel. She has obtained the divine duties of military strategy and victory. When Ares heard this, he was so happy he wanted to laugh out loud, but on the surface, he had to show a look of indignation in front of his sister. Seeing Ares's dreadful expression, Hebe feared he might get up and fight Athena again, so she quickly advised, don't get excited, Ares. You're not the only Olympus god who lost to her. In fact, after that, Athena competed with Apollo in medicine and music, with Demeter in farming, and with Poseidon in running on the sea. She won against all these main gods, so it's not shameful for you to lose to her, not shameful at all. How did she win? Ares asked upon hearing this. Hebe then meticulously recounted the process of Athena's competitions with the other gods to Ares. This goddess first competed with Demeter. Ares's aunt used her divine authority to directly make crops sprout and grow on a piece of land, caused fruit trees and orchards to bear abundant fruit, and made the wheat in the fields heavy like gold. However, after observing Demeter's performance, Athena used her wisdom to analyze the patterns of these crops sprouting, the water and fertilizer needed for growth, as well as the suitable climate and soil, and based on this, she created many new farming methods from scratch to increase yield. Because Demeter's divine authority was merely a manifestation of her divine power, even Demeter could not repeatedly use her divine power to make the gods' orchards and farmlands eternally fruitful, whereas Athena's farming methods could be used by the managers of the gods' orchards and farmlands, helping them to permanently increase output. Therefore, Zeus ruled that Athena had surpassed Demeter and could share a portion of the agricultural divine duties from this farm god. Afterward, Athena successively won in contests against Poseidon and Apollo. She used her wisdom to create chariots and reins, and also invented ships, riding the wind and waves on the sea, defeating Poseidon. In medicine and music, she also convinced Apollo through inventing new medical techniques and musical instruments. After listening to Hebe's narration, Ares also had his own calculations. Farm god Demeter and sea king Poseidon must have truly been inferior in skill. Given the personalities of these two deities, it was impossible for them to willingly submit. Apollo's loss, however, was more subtle. Because he had previously slain the giant Python and saved the goddess Leto, Ares and Apollo had a good relationship, and Ares often heard the music of this god of music, which was a level that could not be surpassed by mere wisdom. This god of light must have seen something in Zeus's actions, and thus deliberately lost to Athena, choosing not to be the first to stand out. And after hearing about Athena's glorious achievements, Ares couldn't help but praise her in his heart. "Excellent, Athena, you are so powerful." The more powerful this goddess was, the better it was for him. He wished that this goddess's brilliance could overshadow all of them, so that Zeus's wary gaze would only be focused on Athena alone. And under the brilliance of this goddess, in the shadows of the 12 gods, Ares would be able to act freely and carry out his survival plan. Thinking of this, Ares felt that the time for the next step was ripe, so he said to his sister, "Hebe, help me up." "Ah, Ares, but Apollo said your injuries haven't fully healed yet." "Don't say so much, just help me up." Under Ares's forceful demand, the goddess Hebe could only obey. She helped her brother's sturdy body up, then supported him, walking step by step to the outside of Zeus's god king's hall. Generally, without Zeus's permission, other gods could not enter the god king's hall to disturb the king of all gods. However, Ares, as one of the 12 main gods of Olympus and Zeus's son, still had this privilege. Seeing him being supported by the goddess Hebe, the Olympus guards standing at the entrance of the god king's hall did not dare to stop him, allowing this battle god, whose face was filled with anger, to walk into the god king's hall. Upon entering the god king's hall, Ares saw that most of the 12 gods were gathered there. Besides them, there were also other important great gods like Leto and Themis. And Athena, the brightest new star among the 4th-generation gods, stood in the position of god of wisdom, where Prometheus had originally stood. A group of gods gathered around the star chart in the center of the god king's hall, which displayed the appearance of the earth. Before Ares arrived, they must have been discussing something important. However, this had nothing to do with Ares. As soon as he entered, he cast his furious gaze towards the goddess of wisdom. Athena. He let out an earth-shattering roar, then walked step by step towards Athena, his posture suggesting that he still wanted to fight this goddess of wisdom before he would give up. Ares. Seeing him like this, Zeus unhappily slapped the star chart in front of him. He reprimanded, "You have already lost to Athena. A bet is a bet. What do you want to do by coming here now? As my son, can you not even admit your defeat?" "I did not." Ares retorted rudely to his old father, then widened his eyes, looked at Athena, and demanded, "What was that last move you used to defeat me?" "That." The goddess of wisdom smiled somewhat awkwardly and replied, "It was a spell, a type of magic I learned from my mother." "Actually, Ares, you are also very strong. I almost lost at the end, really. I only won because I was lucky." She seemed to be trying to reconcile with her brother Ares, but Ares had no intention of listening. After Athena had said what he wanted to hear, he waved his hand and said fiercely, "This time, you win. But, next time I will defeat you." Then, he looked at Zeus and shouted, "Father, to defeat Athena, I also want to learn magic." Chapter 13, Chapter 13 If I knew magic, would I still be like this? What? You want to learn magic too? Upon hearing Ares's words, the Olympus gods were astonished. In the impression of the gods, Ares was definitely the god least associated with magic, a skill requiring wisdom. He had always been synonymous with brutality and thoughtlessness. For him to say this now was like Arnold Schwarzenegger suddenly announcing to the public that he was going to become a magical girl. What's wrong? What's wrong? Seeing the gods' reactions, Ares widened his eyes. Am I, a main god, not worthy of learning magic? Cough, that's not the issue. Ares's words had surprised Zeus too. He coughed, then quietly asked Athena, "Your spell, it didn't hurt his brain, did it?" "Absolutely not." Athena quickly shook her head, denying it. "My spell isn't even directed at the mind." "What do you mean? Do you all think I, Ares, can't learn magic?" Ares, meanwhile, maintained his persona with professional dedication. Standing in the God King's hall, he ranted, "I'm telling you, Athena only beat me because she had magic up her sleeve, and my magic resistance was low. If I learned magic, would I still be like this?" Although everyone felt there was something off about his words, they sounded quite reasonable. "Ares." Zeus thought for a moment, then gestured to Ares. "How about this? There's nothing great about learning magic. I think with your might, learning it would be a complete waste. Come, I'll have your brother forge you a few more divine artifacts." "What do you want?" "A new chariot, how about that?" "No." Ares waved his hand, angered. "Father, I am at least the son of Hera and you, the most legitimate Zeus's son in this God King's hall. Why are you so biased towards Athena? It's bad enough that you carved out our divine duties for her, but are you not even giving us a chance to win them back ourselves? You're too biased." "Exactly." Ares's words immediately garnered the agreement of Hera, who was most indignant about the matter. She looked at her husband and said, "Zeus, how can you be so biased against our son? I tell you, if he learns magic, he will definitely be stronger than Athena, and more like a god of war. You won't even give him this chance. Aren't I afraid that if he can't learn it, he'll throw a tantrum and cause me trouble?" Zeus listened helplessly to his wife's scolding, pondering how to placate her. But at that moment, Leto, the mother of Apollo and Artemis, now officially married to Zeus, stepped forward. She looked at Zeus and softly said, "Zeus, just give Ares a chance. He helped our mother and son, and we owe him. My sister Asteria's daughter, Hecate, is the most powerful sorceress in this world. I will go explain to Hecate and let Ares try with her." Hecate. Hearing that name, Zeus showed hesitation. She was the most formidable deity in the world besides Athena, but when he saw his son, who resembled a red-haired gorilla, he lowered his guard. Judging from the previous duel with Athena, Ares's potential and strength are just so-so. He thought disdainfully. Even if I let him learn, the god of war doesn't have the patience or perseverance to devote himself to such a tedious path of magic. It's perfect, let him go bother Hecate, so that woman doesn't constantly conduct terrifying experiments. Thinking of this, Zeus immediately felt relieved. He nodded to Leto and then said, "Very well, Ares, I'll give you a chance." He looked at Ares and reminded him. "But I must say, if you want to challenge Athena and reclaim your divine duties, you will only have one more chance. If you lose, then you must honestly accept your defeat and stop doing annoying things that disrupt the normal work of the gods." "Yes, I understand." Hearing Zeus's words, Ares was overjoyed. A triumphant smile appeared on his face, looking contemptible and ridiculous in the eyes of the gods. Having gotten his wish, he came before the beautiful bright-eyed goddess, then leaned his head over, looking at her triumphantly, and laughed, "Just you wait, Athena. When I emerge from seclusion, your doom will have arrived. Ha 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 ha. With that, he left the temple on his own, just like the Ares of myth, reckless and devoid of manners. Watching Ares's retreating figure, Poseidon let out a disdainful sneer. He said to Zeus, "Zeus, look at your son, he's like an unevolved idiot. My son is not for you to talk about, Poseidon." Zeus immediately retorted sharply to his brother. "At least he's better than your sons, who don't even look human." The sharp confrontation between the two brothers at this moment showed the gods their hostile relationship. Seeing this, Hades, as the elder brother, and Hestia, as the elder sister, exchanged helpless glances and sighed simultaneously. Meanwhile, Artemis looked somewhat worriedly as her mother, Leto, followed Ares out. She then asked her brother, "Apollo, Hecate is temperamental. Will Ares upset her?" "Who knows, but I think they might actually get along quite well." Apollo glanced at Zeus and Poseidon, who were glaring at each other, then at Athena, who stood smiling, and at Hades and Hestia, who were shaking their heads in resignation. Then he said with a smile, "Olympus isn't exactly a pure land either." On the other side, guided by Leto, Ares quickly left Olympus and arrived on Earth. At this time, there was no human activity on Earth, only various monsters born alongside the gods, and even more bizarre offspring produced by gods with peculiar tastes, like Poseidon, mating with monsters. And Hecate, the Greek goddess of magic, now resided on such an Earth. She lived in seclusion on the shores of the Oceanus, in a basin sealed by a magical barrier. On the other side of this ocean lay the underworld, ruled by Hades. Leto clearly frequented this place. Upon landing, she skillfully led Ares past the magical barrier and into Hecate's domain. After crossing the barrier, this desolate basin revealed its true form. The basin was like a wonderland, with various dense thickets inhabited by many small but beautiful fairies and elves. Heavy immortal fruits hung from the branches, and the air was filled with much richer ether than outside. In terms of environment alone, this place was no worse than the gardens of the gods on Olympus. Deep within the dense forest was Hecate's palace, woven from magic and trees. At the palace entrance lay Cerberus, the future guardian of the underworld, a three-headed dog. It was actually the pet of moon goddess Hecate. Sensing the arrival of the two gods, Leto and Ares, the vigilant hound raised its three heads and looked in their direction with hostility. However, upon seeing that it was Leto, it showed a joyful expression, wagging its tail and licking its tongue as it ran to Leto. "Good boy." Leto gently stroked Cerberus's head and then asked, "Is Hecate home?" The three-headed dog nodded, then barked twice towards the palace. Then, a lazy voice suddenly echoed from within the palace. "Cerberus, who's here?" As soon as the words fell, a small figure slowly walked out of the palace. Chapter 14, Hecate, Goddess of Moon. The goddess who emerged from the tree palace-like structure was a little girl who looked to be only 11 or 12 years old. She wore a long purple dress, the standard style for goddesses among the Greek gods, and had long purple hair that reached her ankles. She also wore a pair of slippers. Her face was full of weariness, her eyes looked hazy, and tears hung at the corners of her eyes. As she walked out of the palace, she scratched her hair and yawned. After coming outside, she glanced at Leto and Ares and said, "Ah, it's Aunt Leto. Is this person Zeus's son?" Her gaze lingered on Ares for a moment, then she said, "Judging by your divine power and appearance, you must be Ares, the son of Zeus and Hera, the god of war, right?" "Yes, this is Ares, the god of war." Goddess Leto looked at Hecate's weary state, feeling a bit helpless. "Hecate, have you been staying up all night again?" "It's nothing, just a small experiment. I won't really die suddenly." Hecate walked up to Cerberus, casually patted the body of the fierce three-headed dog, then looked up at Leto and asked, "So, why have you come to see me today? Why don't I see Apollo and Artemis?" They are both very busy right now. Leto smiled, then said to Hecate, "Actually, I came today to bring someone to apprentice under you and learn magic." "Apprentice? Who?" Hecate looked around, then her gaze focused on Ares. "Could it be him?" "Yes, it's him," Leto nodded with a smile. "Hey? Is there something wrong with your brain?" Hecate jogged over, hands behind her back, circled Ares and looked at him, asking, "You, a god of war, want to learn magic from me? What? Can't I learn?" Ares asked back, crossing his arms. Hecate murmured with a face full of surprise, "Even if Cyclops came to learn magic from me, I'd think it'd be more reliable than a god of war learning magic." "Hey, why do you want to learn magic?" "I want revenge on Athena." Ares shouted indignantly, "As long as I learn magic, I can definitely defeat her." "Magic isn't something for you to use to compete," Hecate sighed upon hearing this. "Hecate, Ares helped us, and he also helped your mother, Asteria. For our sake and your mother's, please let him try here." Leto came before Hecate, pleading for Ares. "All right, fine," Hecate looked at Ares, then continued, "Anyway, Zeus's son certainly won't have any problems with his magical aptitude. It just depends on whether you have the patience and wisdom to learn. I'll say this beforehand, I don't care if you're the god of war or Zeus's son. If you don't follow my rules, I'll kick you out, understood?" "Understood." Ares nodded vigorously, "To defeat Athena, I will temporarily listen to you. Then I shall leave first." Seeing that Hecate had agreed to Ares's request, Leto felt relieved. She looked at Ares and said to him, "Don't worry, Ares. During this time, Zeus is preparing to create new things on the earth, and he was already planning for you to temporarily stop waging war. For now, you can stay here and learn well from Hecate." "Okay." Ares nodded to Leto. After speaking, the black-clad goddess rode on a cloud and returned to Olympus. Hecate watched goddess Leto depart, then sighed, "Ah, what a good aunt. That bastard Zeus really got a bargain." Hearing her words, Ares nodded solemnly. "Hey, I'm slandering your father behind his back, and you're not even angry?" Hecate asked Ares, somewhat surprised by his reaction. "Mother has long had reservations about Zeus's actions," Ares replied. "Besides, the daughter born to Zeus and goddess Metis recently took away my divine duty. No wonder, it seems he really isn't popular." Hecate laughed heartily. "He deserves to be killed by his own son in the future." Ares's heart stirred. It seemed this moon goddess also had a premonition about Zeus's future. However, he pretended to be greatly surprised and asked, "What do you mean by that?" "It means nothing. If you can learn even a tenth of my magic, you'll understand what I mean." Hecate waved her hand and said, "Come inside with me." Ares followed the moon goddess into her palace. Inside this tree palace, there was only one immensely spacious room, which lacked the standard configurations of Greek god temples like divine thrones, baths, or stargazing platforms. This room was directly a colossal library, with 5 stories of tall bookshelves arranged in rows throughout the palace. Various stone tablets and papyri recording arcane knowledge filled these cabinets. Hecate herself also lived here. Her bed was a simple hammock woven from vines, with a few warm animal skins serving as bedding. In addition, some unfinished papyri were scattered on her hammock, and her bedding at the moment appeared disheveled. However, Hecate herself seemed not to mind Ares seeing her casual living state. After leading Ares into her palace, she walked along and said, "Although I promised Leto to take you as an apprentice, I don't have the patience to teach you word by word, like feeding a baby. As Zeus's son, as long as your brain hasn't been hit, you should generally be able to understand introductory magic books. I'll give you a few books, you read them first, and if there's anything you don't understand after reading, then come ask me, understood?" "Understood," Ares nodded. So Hecate led Ares to the innermost bookshelf in the palace, pulled out a few stone tablets from the first and second tier shelves. Then, she stood on tiptoes, trying to reach a stone tablet placed on the fourth tier shelf. However, her current height was indeed limited, so she gritted her teeth and struggled for a long time but still couldn't reach the stone tablet. However, just as Ares was about to step forward to help, he suddenly saw the goddess turn on the spot, and with her skirt swirling, she instantly transformed into a 16 or 17-year-old purple-haired girl, then easily took down the stone tablet from the shelf. Seeing her performance, Ares was stunned for a moment. In that instant, he hadn't felt any divine power fluctuations, so he asked curiously, "Is that magic too?" Hecate looked down at herself, then replied, "No, this is one of my appearances." With that, she stacked the stone tablets together and placed them in Ares's hands, then said to him, "Here, take these. Read everything on these stone tablets, and then you should be almost ready to begin." Chapter 15, Chapter 15 Want to Eat. Magic from the Age of Gods is completely different from later magic. Later magic was created out of necessity as the great source of magical power gradually dried up. Their birth had to undergo a very complicated process beforehand. The system of magic had to be imprinted on the world in the form of religion or scholarship. Without this step, later magic users with diluted bloodlines would not be able to use magic in an environment where magical power was depleted. However, magic from the Age of Gods was fundamentally different from this formalized magic. Because they were born in an era where gods walked the earth, they were from the very beginning fragments of the divine authorities connected to the root. This type of magic required no magic circuit, no rituals, or cumbersome sacrifices. As long as one knew the incantation, it could be released. And because it was directly connected to the root, this magic could also be used in the environment of later eras. Furthermore, in this era, where humans have not yet fully emerged into the world, there is no magic in the Age of Gods, it is all sorcery. This is because sorcery refers to things that humans cannot achieve through other means. In this era, if a person with the right conditions traveled back in time, even if they brought a lighter, that lighter would become fire sorcery. This was both a blessing and a misfortune for Ares. The misfortune need not be elaborated upon. Ares believed that no one who knew Baldique would willingly face him as the god of war. The blessing, however, was that in this era, it would be much easier for Ares to approach the root and explore those supreme mysteries, at least compared to later eras. Just like the stone tablet he now held in his hand, personally produced by Hecate, the Greek goddess of magic. Although it was an introductory guide for new magic users, it was entirely composed of Age of Gods sorcery written in the language of the gods. Ares estimated that if he were to throw these few stone tablets into the clock tower of later eras, it would cause the lords there to fight tooth and nail over them. Fortunately, although his account in this world would eventually be cancelled, it was a privileged account. As one of the gods, and a very important chief god at that, Ares could naturally read these obscure divine texts with ease. The content written on them was also very easy for him to understand, almost like a math textbook from elementary school. It was not difficult for gods to learn sorcery. It was just that many gods, being the embodiment of authority themselves, looked down on sorcery as mere fragments of authority. However, a god like Ares, who was full of motivation and patience for the sake of survival, could easily learn and absorb these things. After receiving Hecate's beginner's textbook, Ares casually found a corner in this tree palace, sat down, and quietly began to read. Meanwhile, Hecate, who had transformed into a young girl, had returned to her hammock and reverted to her little girl form. She jumped onto her hammock, continued to complete the magic theory she had started writing, and then gently tossed the few sheets of papyrus. After leaving her hands, these sheets of papyrus floated on their own, wrapped themselves up in mid-air, and then automatically found a suitable empty spot on a cabinet in the tree palace and placed themselves inside. Having finished all this, Hecate yawned again. She smacked her lips, wanting to just sleep and refresh herself, but then she remembered that a hot-tempered Zeus's son was currently in her palace, and Hecate felt a little uneasy. Immediately, she decided to go and check on Ares. In her own palace, Ares's whereabouts naturally could not escape the moon goddess's eyes. In her perception, Ares's surging divine power was as conspicuous as a torch in the dark night. However, when she bypassed layers of bookshelves and arrived at Ares's corner, she was startled by the god of war before her. Is this really the god of war? Looking at the red-haired man sitting cross-legged in the corner, quietly reading the stone tablet, Hecate even felt a sense of absurdity. Even Zeus probably couldn't imagine such a scene, his most violent son now holed up in a corner, quietly reading a stone tablet carved with obscure and mysterious knowledge. Seeing that Ares seemed to be studying diligently, Hecate did not disturb him, but quietly circled back to her hammock. Maybe he's just staring at the stone tablet blankly, she muttered to herself while sitting on the hammock. However, a day later, when Ares, having finished reading the stone tablets, came to consult her, Hecate realized that this fellow had actually thoroughly understood all the stone tablets she had given him. After answering Ares's few questions about magic, Hecate sat on her hammock, smacked her lips, and asked Ares with great confusion, "Ares, do you really want to learn magic?" "Of course." Ares was holding a blank papyrus he had asked Hecate for and making notes on it. Hearing her question, he said without raising his head, "Why else would I come here if not to learn magic? Isn't living on Olympus good enough?" It's truly surprising that the moon goddess would ask such a question. I just didn't expect the fickle god of war to actually listen to me and finish reading these stone tablets obediently, Hecate said. "Hey, look at what you're saying," Ares said, raising his head. "A father is a father, and a son is a son. Since I've recognized you as my teacher, I will naturally listen to you, just as soldiers must obey their commander's orders on the battlefield. An army that doesn't obey orders can't be considered an army, it's just a scattered mess. Then why do you want to learn magic?" Hecate asked again. Hearing Hecate's words, Ares once again used Athena as a shield. "I've already said it, to defeat that woman Athena and reclaim everything she took from me." "Really?" Hecate's suspicious eyes moved up and down Ares's body, then she withdrew her gaze. "Forget it, it's none of my business anyway. Just learn magic and don't turn it against me." She thought for a moment, and even chuckled, instigating. "If a god of war like you learns my magic, you might actually be able to trample powerful gods like Athena and Poseidon." "Really?" Ares cooperated by showing an excited expression, then he asked, "Can I surpass Zeus?" Hecate heard him, pointed at him, and laughed heartily, "You're dreaming." Chapter 16, The Birth of Aphrodite. The process of learning magic felt to Ares exactly like learning a brand new science subject. Although magic in the Age of Gods focused more on memorizing incantations, it also required calculating and utilizing various data related to magic trajectories, magic amounts, ritual pattern angles, celestial phenomena, and other aspects. Ares was a liberal arts student in his previous world, but fortunately, he chose liberal arts not because he was bad at science and couldn't understand it, but because his close friends all went to liberal arts classes. Although he studied finance in university and struggled with subjects like advanced mathematics because he had left science behind for too long in high school, starting from scratch and learning a science subject from elementary school level all the way to university and even postgraduate level didn't feel difficult for Ares at all. In this era, there was no internet, no mobile phones, no novels, no games, there were no entertainment activities to distract him from his studies. Moreover, as he progressed in learning magic, Ares could clearly feel himself growing stronger step by step, and this feeling filled him with motivation. What's more, he knew in his heart that his only chance of survival lay on this path of magic. Only by understanding more of the secrets of this unreasonable world could he find an opportunity to exploit loopholes and survive. Under the dual motivations of growing stronger and surviving, Ares's learning progress even astonished moon goddess Hecate, who at one point thought Zeus was underutilizing Ares by making him god of war. Currently, Ares, though not yet at Hecate's level, which could be called a doctoral supervisor in magic, is not far from challenging for a doctorate degree. Unfortunately, even though Ares actively asked Hecate to teach him more magic related to time-space and parallel worlds during his studies, such magic was as perplexing as calculus in advanced mathematics. Although Hecate taught some, and Ares tried his best to understand, according to Hecate, Kratos, the primordial god of time, not the second-generation god-king, and chaos already involved the most fundamental mysteries of this world. It was normal for Ares, at his current level, not to understand. The few calculus equations he solved were simply not enough to enable him to decipher the specific use of that black crystal, which clearly involved advanced applications of time-space laws. There was nothing Ares could do about this situation but work hard and strive to reach Hecate's level as soon as possible, then carefully analyze this crystal. However, just as Ares regrouped and prepared to continue studying diligently, Hecate stopped him. "Someone outside has come looking for you," she said to Ares, holding a stone tablet and floating in the air. "I don't want to see her, you go deal with it." "Who's interrupting my study?" Ares's face was full of displeasure, but he couldn't ignore his teacher Hecate's words, so he put down the magic book in his hand, rubbed the back of his neck, and walked out of the tree palace. Outside the tree palace gate, Hecate's pet, the three-headed dog Cerberus, was lying on the ground, its three heads staring menacingly at the forest outside the tree palace, letting out the characteristic woofing sounds of canines. From the corners of its three mouths, lightning, flames, and poisonous gas flowed respectively. Ares looked in the direction it was staring and found a goddess with pure white wings and a rainbow glow around her, hiding behind a bush, trembling in fear at the fierce three-headed dog. Her name is Iris, daughter of Thaumas and Electra, goddess of the rainbow, and messenger of the gods on Olympus. Before Hermes was born, she almost entirely bore the mission of delivering Zeus's commands. Therefore, Iris's arrival meant she brought Zeus's will. "Go away, get lost." So Ares kicked Cerberus in the butt, driving him to a corner of the palace's outer garden. Facing the god of war, this fierce beast could only let out pitiful, wronged whines, then tucked his tail between his legs and retreated into his doghouse. When Ares first arrived, this jealous evil dog thought Ares was coming to steal his master, so he often barked at Ares. However, on a dark and stormy night, when Ares, who had gotten up to observe the celestial phenomena and study astronomical magic, had his thoughts interrupted by this annoying dog, he furiously showed him the god of war's iron fist. Since then, Cerberus became well behaved whenever he saw Ares. After chasing away the three-headed dog, Ares approached Iris, looked down at the young goddess, and asked, "Iris, do you have a command from Father for me?" "Yes, yes, great Ares." Seeing Cerberus driven away, Iris breathed a slight sigh of relief. She saluted Ares by placing her hand on her chest, then peered at the distant tree palace and asked, "Is Moon Goddess there? Are you looking for her too?" Ares asked. "Yes," Iris replied, lowering her head. "A new great god has been born on Olympus, and God King, to celebrate her birth, is inviting all qualified deities in the world, except for criminals, to a banquet on Olympus. Besides you, he has also invited Moon Goddess. So that's it." Ares turned to look at the tree palace, then said, "Hecate doesn't like to see outsiders. I'll help you inform her. When is the banquet?" "That's wonderful." Iris also breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing this. It was clear that this goddess also didn't particularly want to face the goddess of witchcraft, whom even Zeus was wary of. She replied, "The banquet is 5 days from now, and the location is Zeus's temple." "I understand." Ares waved his hand and said, "You may go. Then I'll be leaving." Iris spread her wings and flew into the air. "I still need to deliver God King's invitations to other gods." Ares looked at Iris, and suddenly, an idea struck him. He then called out, "Wait a moment, Iris, which great god has been newly born this time?" "Ah!" Iris, who was about to fly away, forcibly stopped upon hearing Ares's words, scattering a few feathers in the sky. Then she replied, "The newly born great god is the daughter of the sky and the sea. She is tall and graceful, slender and full-figured, with a graceful and dignified posture. She is the embodiment of beauty, the epitome of love, and her name is Aphrodite." Ares murmured. "Oh? You already know?" Iris said in surprise. "Ah, I had a feeling." Ares clutched his forehead, saying with some headache, "I suddenly don't feel like going anymore." Chapter 17 Hot Women. Aphrodite, the Greek goddess of love and beauty, was arguably the most beautiful woman in all of Greece, if judged solely by her appearance. For Ares, the war god in the original myth, this goddess was also the most important woman in his life. In mythology, Ares would only fly into a rage over Aphrodite's infidelity, rushing down to the mortal realm to kill the mortals who committed adultery with the goddess of love and beauty. And Aphrodite would only feel jealous of Ares's flirtatiousness, even cursing Eos, the dawn goddess, causing her to fall into an endless lust for mortals. However, for the current Ares, Aphrodite was nothing but a huge problem. Firstly, because the male gods on Olympus, including Zeus, vied for Aphrodite's affection, leading to such jealousy that even Zeus himself could not obtain Aphrodite. The king of gods, in a fit of pique, married the most beautiful goddess to Hephaestus, the ugliest of the male gods. If Ares were to have an affair with her, it would lead to discord among brothers. Secondly, many of Ares's setbacks were due to Aphrodite causing trouble outside. From the very beginning, when Cupid, the little god of love, shot Hades with an arrow of love, causing him to irresistibly lust after Persephone and forcibly abduct her back to the underworld, leading to Demeter's heartbreak and the wilting of all life on earth, to later when Aphrodite contended with Athena and Hera for the golden apple, which triggered the most famous Trojan War in Greek history. Each time, Ares was passively drawn into conflicts with other gods because of Aphrodite, not only offending all the gods on Olympus but almost losing everything he had. In short, it is no exaggeration to describe Aphrodite as a femme fatale. Ares now only wants to stay as far away from this goddess of love and beauty as possible. No, to be safe, he'd best stay far away from all goddesses. In mythology, Ares's enmity with sea king Poseidon was due to Poseidon's son raping Ares's daughter, Alcippe. Ares, in a fit of rage, killed Poseidon's son. If Ares were not to have children, wouldn't he be able to solve these troublesome matters once and for all? Moreover, Athena should also be on the verge of realizing Zeus's ambitions for her. To protect herself, she should take the opportunity to make the vow of a virgin goddess. In light of this, Ares also came up with a new plan. With Athena as a shield, this new plan would be reasonable and not troublesome for his persona. So, while pondering, Ares returned to the tree palace and informed Hecate, who was engaged in magical research, of this news. After hearing the news Ares brought, Hecate pouted a little unhappily and grumbled. It seems I have to go this time. I need to figure out a way to make myself look ugly." Ares heard her and said, "All the goddesses under heaven wish to dress as beautifully as possible for Zeus's banquet. Why are you trying to go in the opposite direction with your makeup? What if I dress too beautifully and that guy Zeus sets his eyes on me?" Hecate rolled her eyes. "I'd rather sleep with a sea monster than have anything to do with that guy." "Are you still afraid of Zeus?" Ares asked in surprise. "You should be stronger than Athena, teacher." "So what? In this era, no one can defeat the king of gods except the destined usurper," Hecate said. "If Zeus insists on bothering me, the last resistance I can offer is to curse him and shorten his reign as much as possible." "Usurper?" Ares's heart stirred, and he quickly asked, "Teacher, what do you mean by that? You never taught me this point before." Why are you learning this? Hecate turned her head to look at him, asking mischievously, could it be that you also want to rebel? Nonsense, I'm just curious. Ares said solemnly upon hearing this, Hecate, you are insulting my divinity. I am eternally loyal to Olympus. Oh, really? Hecate looked Ares up and down, then snorted and chuckled, forget it, you don't have to be so afraid of me. For me, I can't wait for that old pervert Zeus to die soon. As for traitors like you, I'll just pretend not to see them. Ares was non-committal to Hecate's words, not taking her bait at all, which left the moon goddess somewhat helpless. However, after thinking for a moment, Ares suddenly asked Hecate again, Teacher, this makeup, could you also help me with my makeup? Why are you putting on makeup? Hecate looked at Ares with disdain. The dignified war god is secretly a sissy. No. Ares touched his face and said, I think I'm too handsome, and I hope you can help me become a little uglier. Pa! Hearing Ares's words, Hecate spat at him with extreme contempt, then ignored him completely, turned around, pulled open a door to imaginary space, and disappeared directly from the palace. I'm serious. Seeing Hecate disappear, Ares was also a little helpless. Upon reflection, his words just now seemed to have a bit of shamelessness in them, but he was simply afraid that his position as war god would have some inexplicable attraction to Aphrodite. The current Ares wished he could make himself uglier than Hephaestus, preferably so that Aphrodite would take a detour whenever she saw him, saving him from future trouble. However, in this era, for him as a male god to wear makeup to Zeus's banquet would seem disrespectful to Zeus. So, after careful consideration, Ares decided to abandon this plan. Anyway, once his new plan was out, Aphrodite probably wouldn't have any thoughts about him anymore. 5 days later, Ares packed his gear and prepared to depart, and Hecate, having finished her makeup, appeared before Ares. She had now taken on her maiden form, wearing a deep purple long dress with purple hair flowing over her shoulders. However, she had forcefully painted her face a pale white with white powder, and then used purple pigment to draw many mysterious symbols on her face. Finally, she painted her lips with bright red pigment to resemble the Joker's lips from Batman, making her look like a witch performing magic in a circus. Looking at her appearance, Ares was speechless. Hecate at this moment looked like a monster, but what was certain was that if she went to Olympus looking like this, she definitely wouldn't have to worry about any male god taking an interest in her. So, after getting ready, the master and disciple set off towards Olympus. Chapter 18, Chapter 18 I told you I am so handsome. Unlike the Olympus that later fell to the earth, at this time, Olympus, as the divine realm, was still suspended in the sky. Below it was the boundless sea, the territory ruled by Sea King Poseidon, but if one climbed to the highest point of Olympus and leaped down, following the mountain wall, they would fall into the boundless river Styx controlled by Hades. This was a special spatial overlap phenomenon that Olympus possessed as the divine realm. It was daytime now, and the golden gate on the mountainside of Olympus, leading to the gods' residences, had opened, welcoming the deities who did not reside on Olympus but came from all corners of the earth. Ares also led Hecate inside. Here, he had become the host, while moon goddess Hecate seemed somewhat unwelcome by the other gods. When the two passed through the golden gate, Eos, the goddess of dawn with rose-red fingers, who was guarding the gate, came to greet them with 3 virgin maidens, Hermes. This goddess, dressed in a long crimson gown, showed a joyful expression on her face when she saw Ares. Ares, you've finally returned, she said to Ares. Without you guarding Olympus at night, we all felt very uneasy. Ares looked down at this goddess. As she spoke, this beautiful goddess actually tried to rub against him, which scared Ares into quickly taking a step back, turning his body, and slightly avoiding her. Eos, the goddess of dawn, was also a goddess who had a romantic affair with Ares in myths, and like Aphrodite, Ares was not her only beloved, she had both human and divine lovers, and even wanted to poach Orion from Artemis. This was a thirsty and troublesome goddess, but in Ares's current memory, he should not have had any substantial relationship with this goddess of dawn yet, which made him breathe a sigh of relief. "What are you talking about?" Ares angrily retorted while dodging Eos's approach. "Isn't Athena on the mountain? Isn't she stronger than me? Goddess of victory, how awesome!" His words were full of his displeasure and dislike for Athena. Now that he was out in such a crowded place, Ares had to uphold his idol image and play the part fully. Athena is very busy with many matters, how could she wholeheartedly focus her energy on guarding Olympus? Eos sighed softly, looking at Ares with a resentful expression. "These days, only a few weak goddesses like us are still watching the gate, fearing that some monster might take advantage of this time to attack the mountain and disturb the great gods." As she spoke, she twirled her braid and cast a flirtatious glance at Ares. "Ares! Auntie, please don't be like this, Auntie, we are decent people." It was clear that the beautiful goddess of dawn Eos had long admired the handsome and powerful Ares, but in Ares's memory, she used to be very reserved, at most smiling more happily when Ares entered and exited the Golden Gate. However, this time she was so proactive, probably because the true goddess of beauty had been born, thus stimulating a sense of crisis in these goddesses and prompting them to act faster. But Ares now had no desire to have anything with these beautiful goddesses. Just as he was about to harden his heart and push this goddess away to leave directly, he heard his teacher Hecate behind him let out a laugh. "Ares, I didn't realize you were quite popular." Hearing this voice, Eos vigilantly looked behind Ares, but when she saw Hecate, whose face was painted like a performance artist, her face visibly relaxed. She glanced at Hecate's appearance and secretly compared it to her own reflection in the pool when she washed up this morning, and immediately a hint of contempt arose in her heart. A rookie, no threat at all. However, moon goddess Hecate held a respected status, so outwardly, Eos still needed to greet her. "So it's the esteemed Hecate, you've come as well." Hecate nodded, then reached out and deliberately patted Ares's arm with a loud slap, chuckling mischievously, "It was on the way, so I came with my disciple." Eos saw that after her rough action, Ares showed no sign of anger at all, standing obediently in place. Even though she knew this was mostly because Hecate was strong enough, a trace of jealousy couldn't help but rise in her heart. She wanted to continue her pursuit of Ares, but Ares took the opportunity to say, "Zeus's banquet is about to begin. We shouldn't delay. Being late to his banquet is a big taboo, Eos, you should finish up quickly and come over too." After speaking, Ares fled, as if escaping, taking Hecate with him. Eos, the goddess of dawn, could only stomp her foot angrily on the ground, helplessly watching Ares depart. There was no way. In terms of divinity and power, neither Ares nor Hecate was someone she could compare to. The only way for the goddess of dawn to win her beloved's heart was to desperately throw herself at him, but from the current situation, Ares was not falling for it. Meanwhile, Ares and Hecate, who had followed the colonnaded mountain path to the Cloud Sea, finally arrived at the banquet venue. The banquet was not held inside the God King's Hall, but rather in the enormous floating island garden outside the God King's Hall. Here, Hebe, the goddess of youth, had already led the team of maidens from Olympus, arranging the venue in perfect order. Rows of long tables were filled with various exquisite foods and divine wine, and many noble gods moved between these tables, chatting in groups of 2 or 3. Upon arriving at the banquet hall, Ares complained to Hecate, "See? I didn't lie to you, did I? I told you I'm too handsome and it would cause trouble. Just the goddess of dawn, can that even be called trouble?" Hecate scoffed, "You're a chief god. Just play with her for a bit, then dump her, she can't do anything to you, can she? Don't even think about it. Once you have a relationship with her, that's, what was it called, right, getting entangled in karma." Ares said, annoyed, "I don't want to cause so much trouble right now." As they spoke, the two walked towards the venue, and the arrival of Ares and Hecate attracted the attention of the gods, the former because of his noble status, and the latter because her face was painted so ugly. All the guests at the banquet turned their attention to the two of them, but neither Ares nor Hecate paid any mind. They walked into the banquet hall, each took a cup of divine wine from the tray held by a maid, and then naturally separated. Ares took his wine cup to greet Zeus and Hera and other elders, while Hecate quietly retreated to a corner of the banquet hall by herself. Even tucked away in a corner, Hecate's unconventional face would surely not go unnoticed, but because this moon goddess, who commanded magic and witchcraft, had a fearsome reputation, no one dared to foolishly provoke her. All the gods pretended not to see this goddess, chatting and laughing as before, and Hecate was quite satisfied with this situation. However, at this moment, a male god suddenly approached Hecate with a wine cup. Hecate, Prometheus, the former god of wisdom, said to her, "Do you have time now? Let's talk." Chapter 19, Chapter 19 Aphrodite. Ah! Hecate looked up, gazing blankly at Prometheus, then replied, "Talk? What is there for us to talk about? Moon goddess, you should have been able to foresee this." Prometheus sat down beside Hecate, holding his cup, and said, "Zeus has already ordered Epimetheus and me to create new beings from clay on the earth. Their arrival signifies a new order, a new era, and new primates for this world." He looked at the starry sky, higher than Olympus, and continued, "I have made up my mind to help the new primates. Although they are much weaker than us, they have more potential and more hope. In the distant future, when the planet perishes, if anyone can find a way to survive, it will undoubtedly be them. But I am a little afraid of your disciple, Ares. What does he really think about these new primates? Do you have to ask me all these irrelevant things?" Hecate pulled a long face and said, "The reason I stayed away from Olympus was that I didn't want to get involved in these whirlpools. What happens to the old gods, or the new primates, what does any of that have to do with me, Hecate? I apologize, I misspoke." Seeing that the moon goddess seemed a bit angry, Prometheus quickly apologized to her. Then, he thought for a moment and changed his approach, asking, "Then, are you satisfied with your disciple Ares or not? You can at least tell me that, right?" "He's all right." Hecate looked at Prometheus, then nonchalantly prevaricated, "At least he doesn't bother me when he has nothing to do, interrupting my research." "Is that so?" Prometheus lowered his head in thought, then stood up and said to Hecate, "I understand. Thank you, Hecate." Just as Prometheus was getting up to leave, on the other side, Ares, standing in the center of the banquet within the circle of the 12 gods, happened to see the former god of wisdom departing. He wondered, "Prometheus? What is he doing looking for Hecate?" It wasn't that Ares was overly concerned about Hecate, but rather because the one seeking her out was Prometheus. According to his estimation, Prometheus and Athena were probably the only two gods on Olympus who vaguely guessed his true intentions. Athena, for now, is out of the question. That goddess is currently in a difficult position, and any opposition, troublemaking, or cooperation with him would definitely have to be done in secret. This is an unspoken understanding between people like them who play both sides. Moreover, Athena is currently most constrained by Zeus, so she probably can't afford to pay much attention to him. As for Prometheus, that fellow has already gone to the mortal realm. Although he lost the benefits that came with the god of wisdom divine position after shedding his divine duties, he also gained more freedom and ample time to plan his own affairs. If he were to extract anything from Hecate, Ares was very afraid that this person would secretly scheme against him. Hearing Ares's words, Hephaestus also glanced over there, then replied, "He might be asking the moon goddess for some concepts of divine duties. Recently, Zeus seems to have tasked him and his brother with creating a new batch of creatures." Oh! Ares's heart stirred at the news. Indeed, Leto had mentioned it when she sent him to Hecate. It seemed that the humans of mythology were about to appear on Earth. So he pressed, when are they planning to create them? I don't know. The god of fire shook his head. Zeus has put Athena fully in charge of this matter. Why Athena again? Ares raged at the opportune moment, why her? Don't be so quick to get angry. Hephaestus shook his head and advised, it is indeed most suitable for Athena, the wisest of the fourth-generation gods, to handle the creation. No way. Ares calculated in his mind, I must also have a hand in the creation of all things. Just as he was speaking, the doors of the God King's hall suddenly opened. A fragrant breeze carrying flower petals flew out, the muses began to sing, and Apollo played a melodious tune on his lyre. A beautiful goddess, dressed in a magnificent long gown and adorned with a flower wreath, walked out of the God King's hall with light steps, accompanied by several maidservants. The protagonist of this banquet, Aphrodite, finally appeared before the heroes. She had golden hair, and her cerulean eyes were as blue as the sea where she was born. Her skin, exposed from beneath her pink long dress, shimmered like white porcelain. Her figure, appearance, facial proportions, and inherent temperament were all perfect, all captivating. The moment they saw Aphrodite, all the male gods present felt as if they had fallen in love, while all the goddesses, with the exception of a few who possessed extreme self-confidence, involuntarily showed expressions of envy, jealousy, and resentment. Ares leaned forward to glance at the goddess, and his heart couldn't help but stir. It must be said that the current Aphrodite truly was a flower unsullied by mud, a lotus pure and unblemished. As the goddess of love and beauty, she seemed to naturally possess an ability to attract others to fall in love with her. This ability was extremely potent, so much so that even a chief god like Ares found it difficult to resist. Feeling the flutter in his heart, Ares quickly lowered his head. When he looked up again, having prepared himself, Aphrodite was merely passable in his eyes. Compared to his previous two-dimensional wives, she simply couldn't compare. However, among the male gods present, it seemed only he and Prometheus were truly aware. He was prepared and had psychological expectations, while Prometheus was too intelligent. From the moment he saw Aphrodite and felt his heart stir, the former god of wisdom knew that no matter what, such a woman could never fall into his hands. Even if there was a 1 in 10 million chance Zeus betrothed her to him, he wouldn't be able to keep her. So Prometheus very timely reined in his thoughts and completely discarded any superfluous ideas. Apart from these two, Zeus, Poseidon, Apollo, and others all showed adoration for her. Aphrodite instantly became the focal point of the entire banquet. Come, let me introduce her to everyone. Zeus beckoned to Aphrodite, who walked over innocently. Zeus then casually put his arm around her fair, fragrant shoulder, taking advantage of the moment while introducing her to all the gods present. Due to the need for divine duty adjustments, the moon goddess Selene has voluntarily withdrawn from the ranks of the 12 gods. Therefore, Selene's position as moon goddess will temporarily be taken over by my daughter Artemis. And this is our new chief god of Olympus. Her name is Aphrodite, and she will become our goddess of love and beauty on Olympus. Chapter 20 I want to choose him. Selene, the moon goddess, voluntarily giving up her position was definitely a lie. She, like Helios, was likely coerced and enticed by Zeus, forced to relinquish her place. Similar to the sun god, Zeus wouldn't truly eliminate deities representing the most important celestial bodies of a region. Although Artemis inherited the moon goddess's divine position, she primarily oversees hunting, and Selene will continue to manage the moon's operation in this world as Artemis's subordinate deity. However, regardless, Selene's replacement by Artemis and Aphrodite was already a foregone conclusion. Artemis's thoughts were solely on matters related to her divine duties. For her, it didn't matter who became the king of Olympus, posing no threat to Zeus. As for Aphrodite, there's no need to mention her, she's merely a pretty face. Zeus, that old lecher, probably promoted her just to get his hands on the most beautiful goddess. After Aphrodite arrived, Zeus, under the guise of introducing the new main deity to the gods, stayed with Aphrodite in front of Hera, and his other hand was constantly caressing Aphrodite, taking advantage of her. However, this situation was quickly broken as several other male main gods, captivated by Aphrodite, such as Poseidon and Apollo, also approached Aphrodite, showering her with flattery. 2 generations of one family quickly began arguing over this woman. Seeing this, Ares quickly avoided the center of the storm and ran to Hecate's side, watching from a distance. "Aren't you going to contend for her?" Hecate was just chatting with her cousin Artemis when she saw Ares avoiding them like a plague god. Hecate asked curiously. "The most beautiful woman in the world is right there. And the most troublesome woman." Ares looked over there and said irritably. "Artemis, why don't you pull your brother back? If he gets involved, Zeus and Poseidon might just beat his brains out. I can't control him." Artemis glanced at the Olympus's most handsome man who was holding a lyre and arguing red-faced with Zeus and the others, then said unhappily, "As soon as he sees Aphrodite, he says such a beautiful being only deserves to belong to him, and he just went straight up. Mother and I couldn't even hold him back." Hecate suddenly chuckled softly. "Who do you think this Aphrodite will end up with? Do you even need to ask?" Artemis pouted. "It's definitely Zeus. He's been eyeing Aphrodite for who knows how long. But Hera is watching Zeus." Hecate said, glancing at Ares, "Your mother is being provoked, and you can't possibly go up and stop it, can you?" Ares nodded. "I'm not getting involved in this mess." "Ares, then tell me, to whom will Zeus eventually marry Aphrodite?" Artemis asked. Ares pursed his lips. "Who knows? Perhaps my brother will end up gaining the most from this." "Hephaestus," Artemis said, her forehead covered in black lines, "it's not that I'm targeting him, but Aphrodite probably wouldn't fancy him, right? Whether she fancies him or not, as long as Zeus is happy, who cares if she likes him or not?" Ares said indifferently, crossing his arms. As they were speaking, the male gods arguing over Aphrodite seemed to have reached a conclusion. Since they were at a stalemate, Zeus suggested that they showcase their masculine charm in front of Aphrodite, allowing her to decide whom to marry. The male gods all agreed to this condition, so they set up their displays and began to take turns showcasing their talents in front of Aphrodite. First up was Poseidon. He raised his trident, summoned vast seas, and his majestic chariot, then began to boast to the goddess of beauty about how amazing and powerful he was. But when Aphrodite asked him who was stronger, Zeus or him, the king of the seas made a disgusted face and retreated grandly. Afterward, Apollo and Zeus also took turns. As the most handsome man in Olympus and the dream lover of countless goddesses, Apollo passionately played a piece of music in front of Aphrodite, but the goddess of love and beauty merely looked at him with appreciative eyes, a gaze that was more like looking at a good girlfriend than a man. Zeus then also came before Aphrodite. He was simpler, just a single phrase, "I am the king of gods," already caused a ripple in Aphrodite's eyes. However, when Aphrodite demanded that she must have the authority of the Queen of Heaven if she were to marry Zeus, the exasperated Hera finally pulled a bolt of lightning down from the sky, scaring away the mere decoration that was Aphrodite. After his wife ruined his plans, Zeus's expression was not very pleasant, but he was in the wrong and couldn't directly vent his anger at Hera. So, he decided to take all his anger out on Aphrodite. He ordered Aphrodite to choose a husband from the male gods present at the banquet today and marry him. Moreover, she could not choose the 3 main gods she had already rejected. This put Aphrodite in a difficult position. Leaving aside the characters of Zeus, Poseidon, and Apollo for a moment, they were indeed the 3 most desirable stocks among the male gods of Olympus. Aphrodite was unwilling to lower herself and marry male gods who were not of main deity status. And now, besides these 3 desirable options, the only male gods left among the 12 gods of Olympus were Ares, Hades, and Hephaestus. Hephaestus was very talented, but unfortunately, his appearance was rather regrettable, and the haughty Aphrodite naturally looked down on him. Although Hades, the king of the underworld, was not inferior to Poseidon in terms of appearance, authority, or power, being with him would mean spending most of her time in the desolate and void underworld, which the goddess of love and beauty also found unacceptable. So, after some consideration, the goddess of love and beauty decisively bypassed the other gods and walked towards Ares, who was with Hecate. "Hey, hey, hey, she seems to have seen you." Seeing this, the moon goddess pulled her cousin, quietly moving away from Ares, and at the same time, gloated to Ares. "What cold remarks are you making?" Ares said angrily, "Isn't it because the makeup you put on is too eye-catching?" As he spoke, the moon goddess and the new moon goddess, both disloyal, had already left him far behind. Ares originally wanted to run too, but Zeus had already called out to him. "Ares, don't move." Ares reluctantly stopped, turned around, and saw the golden-haired, blue-eyed goddess of beauty standing in front of him, her eyes sparkling as she looked at him. "Zeus!" She pointed at Ares and shouted, "I choose him." "What?" Ares's reply was just as decisive, "Damn woman, get lost." Chapter 21, Chapter 21 The Virgin Vow. Upon hearing Ares's words, Aphrodite's face turned pale with shock, and the gods erupted in an uproar. "Ares, did you hear what we were saying?" Zeus composed himself, then asked his son, "Aphrodite, she wants to marry you, you know." "I heard it," Ares replied. "But why should I agree to her?" "Oh, she wants to marry me, so I must agree? Is she Aphrodite one of the 12 great gods, and I Ares am not? That's not the issue. Of course, you have the right to refuse, but..." Zeus looked at Aphrodite, hesitating to speak. "Ares, is there something wrong with your body?" "What could be wrong with my body?" Ares retorted. "Can you find any god among the 4th generation gods who is healthier than me? Then since you're healthy, why wouldn't you agree when such a beautiful woman proposes to you?" Zeus tugged at his white beard on his chin, completely baffled. "Could it be that you like men?" "Nonsense!" Ares stomped his foot in anger. "Father, you are insulting my divinity." "Exactly, what nonsense are you spouting?" Hera also shot her husband a displeased glance. "Where would our son get so many strange hobbies?" "Actually, pretty boys aren't out of the question," Zeus muttered softly, but he didn't let Hera hear him. "But Ares," Hera turned back to her son and began lecturing him again, "you're already this age, and it's truly time to consider your spouse. Look, you are powerful and handsome, and you and Aphrodite can be considered a match made in heaven. The children you have will surely be very strong gods. If you have more children, it will also make our Olympus more prosperous. But I haven't had enough fun yet, and I don't want to get married." Ares behaved like a spoiled brat at this moment. "Enough!" Seeing Ares's behavior, Poseidon, who had just been snubbed by Aphrodite, roared with displeasure, "This woman just rejected me and Apollo, and now she chose you, but you don't want her? What do you mean, Ares? Are you saying that something we fought tooth and nail for, you simply look down upon? Are you looking down on me and Apollo?" Ares looked towards Apollo upon hearing this and indeed found the handsome man frowning deeply, his expression appearing somewhat displeased. After all, he was a man who would forget his divine status for a beloved boy. Apollo was usually clear-headed, but once it involved such beautiful things, he would also get carried away. There was nothing Ares could do. At this moment, he was cornered by 2 main gods. If he didn't nod in agreement, he would probably offend Apollo, with whom he had painstakingly built a good relationship, and his uncle Poseidon, together. Fortunately, among the gods present, Ares still had his close companion Athena. So he tried hard to wrinkle his face into a ball, showing an angry expression, and then suppressed his anger and said, "How could I have such a thought, Poseidon? You are arbitrarily provoking the brotherhood between me and Apollo. Even you, you must be responsible for what you say. Oh! Poseidon immediately sneered, then tell me, why are you unwilling to marry Aphrodite? That's because of Athena, of course. Ares pointed his hand, directly at Athena, the goddess of wisdom, who was standing among the gods, originally holding a wine glass and watching the show. After he pointed at her, Athena showed a look of astonishment, as if saying, how did this get dragged into me? However, Ares ignored her feelings and continued on his own. Getting married means having children with a wife, and having children will delay my time. Won't my time for training and studying magic be delayed then? If this continues, when will I ever be able to defeat Athena? With you like this, you'll never be able to defeat her, will you? Zeus thought so in his heart, but in front of Hera, he still couldn't arbitrarily belittle the son he had with her, so he said. Having children, what time can that possibly delay? Ares, it's good that you focus on training yourself, but you should also pay attention to balancing work and rest. I don't believe it. Ares's eyes darted around, and he looked at Athena, saying, unless Athena also agrees to marry one of the male gods present, then I will marry Aphrodite. It was difficult for anyone to realize that Ares's words were intentionally misleading, because when viewed in connection with Ares's own persona, this was just another foolish remark from the impulsive and thoughtless god of war. However, this time, Ares's words struck a chord with Zeus. Once Athena, as a goddess, was married off, then according to the prevailing patriarchal society, whether she liked it or not, her divinity would slowly be absorbed by her husband, gradually replaced by him, and eventually she would become a subordinate deity to her husband. Such an Athena, no matter how strong or intelligent, would pose no threat to Zeus. The goddess of wisdom herself clearly understood this point. Zeus had been planning this matter all along, but Athena had repeatedly defused it with ease. However, this time, Ares was dragging her down with him, even at the cost of self-destruction. No matter what, Athena could no longer just brush it off this time. So Zeus turned to Athena and asked with a chuckle. Athena, I think Ares's suggestion is excellent. It's a great opportunity for you to marry a male god today. Our Olympus will have double happiness, a great auspicious event, indeed a great auspicious event. He pointed to the male gods at the banquet and said, look, all the famous male gods in the world are here today. Pick one you like, and I'll make the decision for you. If you really don't like any of them, Daddy can make a sacrifice and be your husband. Regardless of the perverted thoughts flashing through Zeus's mind, as soon as he spoke these words, the male gods present, who had originally lost interest, became excited once again. In terms of appearance alone, although Athena was not as beautiful as Aphrodite, she was still an extremely beautiful goddess. Moreover, she exuded an aura of nobility even greater than Aphrodite's, like the Queen of Olympus, which greatly aroused men's desire for conquest. Furthermore, she was also the one among the current 12 great gods, apart from Zeus, with the most divine duties and the widest range of authority. If one were to marry her, it would not be an exaggeration to describe it as soaring to great heights. Damn you, Ares, you utterly despicable gorilla! Athena secretly seethed, but on the surface, she had to maintain a proper smile. She looked at Zeus and said with a smile, Great Zeus, thank you for your kindness, but I apologize, I have no intention of marrying. She thought for a moment, then raised 3 fingers and suddenly swore to the heavens. By the name of Pallas Athena, I swear to this world that I shall remain unmarried and chaste for life. Should I willingly violate this oath, may all that I possess be stripped away, and may I be cast into the lowest depths of Tartarus, to suffer the most agonizing torments in the deepest hell. She swore to the world by her true name, and immediately received a response from the entire world. In the unseen, a protective force from the inhibitory power descended upon her, granting Athena the protection of the entire world. Now, she could rightfully refuse any related demands from the god King Zeus. Feeling Athena's oath take effect, Zeus's face darkened. Even he could no longer force Athena, who had received the protection of the inhibitory power. So he said somewhat dejectedly, "All right, since that is your wish, then I shall comply with my daughter's wishes." In this way, Athena had both gains and losses. She had indeed preserved her last line of defense, but this also precluded the possibility of her seeking other male main gods and forming an unbreakable alliance with them. All in all, Zeus was the one who profited. However, before Zeus could finish organizing his thoughts, he heard the voice of his son, who was suspected of having a mental illness, again. "Humph, it's truly you, Athena. To be able to come up with such a method, to suppress your desires and focus on strengthening yourself," Ares said with a sneer, hands on his hips. "But do you think this can stop my resolve? I'm possible. Whatever you have, I must also have." With that, he also raised 3 fingers and, following suit, swore to the heavens. "By the name of Ares, the god of war, I swear to this world that I shall remain unmarried and chaste for life. Should I willingly violate this oath, may all that I possess be stripped away, and may I be cast into the lowest depths of Tartarus, to suffer the most agonizing torments in the deepest hell." Chapter 22, God of Virginity. After this oath was made, Ares immediately felt himself locked by the restraining force, and then a protection belonging to the restraining force appeared on his body. However, after his words fell, all the gods present, whether Athena or Zeus, whether Poseidon or Apollo, were stunned by him, standing rooted to the spot, unable to recover for a long time. Eos, the goddess of dawn, who had always been showering Ares with attention, fainted uncontrollably the moment she heard this oath. And after hearing the oath Ares made, Hecate spat out the wine in her mouth, then she covered her mouth, trembling with laughter, even her makeup was ruined by her. "Ah, truly worthy of being my Hecate's disciple." She wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes as she spoke with a voice mixed with coughs and gasps. "What a genius!" The nearby Artemis looked at Ares with admiration, a thoughtful expression in her eyes. "Zeus has also been urging me to marry recently, should I also make an oath for myself?" Olympus was silent except for Hecate's unrestrained laughter. After a long while, Zeus, the king of the gods, slowly turned his head and asked his son in a bewildered tone, "Ares, what are you aiming for?" "I will defeat Athena. No matter the cost." Ares roared, "Whatever Athena has, I will also obtain. Whatever Athena agrees to, I will oppose. A man is not a man just because he is married and has children. Instead, he must rush to the battlefield according to his beliefs, and win victory no matter the cost. Only then can he be considered a man, a warrior." He clenched his fists, shouting with boiling passion. After Ares's words fell, the god's garden on Olympus once again fell into a long silence, the second time in countless years. After a long while, Zeus, the king of the gods, spoke to his son with a respectful tone, "Ares, truly worthy of you." As an old lecher, he truly couldn't imagine how he would live without being close to beautiful women. Thinking of this, even in his heart, a trace of awe for his son inevitably arose. And after hearing Ares's great virgin oath, even Sea King Poseidon and Apollo were awestruck. The two looked at each other speechless, standing rooted to the spot, at a loss. "Uncle, brother, are you still going to force me to marry Aphrodite like this?" Ares stood with his hands on his hips, haughtily, taking a step forward and standing in front of Poseidon, staring at him. "You're amazing, you're amazing." Facing this nephew of his, Poseidon didn't know what to say. He waved his hands repeatedly, then gave up on forcing Ares, and retreated back into the crowd of gods. Apollo plucked his lyre, not knowing how to answer Ares, and could only say, "Ares, my admiration for you is beyond words. I can only express my feelings with music later." After speaking, he also followed Poseidon back among the gods. And when Ares saw Poseidon and Apollo being repelled by his shout, he immediately felt his whole body grow taller. He turned around, looked at the god of love and beauty, who was utterly bewildered by him, and loudly said, "Did you hear that? Aphrodite, I am now the god of virgins, don't touch me. You. Aphrodite shivered at Ares's roar, and tears immediately streamed down from her eyes. With tearful eyes, she pointed at Ares and shouted, "You mark my words." Looking at Aphrodite's wronged expression, many of the male gods present showed expressions of heartache for her. Afterward, they turned their very displeased gazes onto Ares. Upon noticing the gazes of these male gods, Ares looked around and shouted with his head held high, "What's wrong? What are you looking at? What are you looking at, you bunch of midgets? If I hadn't voluntarily withdrawn to deal with Athena, would it even be your turn?" He patted his chest and said, "Now you at least have a chance to marry Aphrodite. I left this opportunity for you. Not only do you not thank me, but you even hate me. Is there any logic to that?" After hearing Ares say this, the surrounding male gods looked at each other, and then realized that what Ares said was suddenly unpleasant, but it seemed to really make sense. As a result, some gods who had originally been hot-headed under the influence of the goddess of beauty's divine power and were ready to stand up for her, also calmed down. Some even secretly thanked Ares in their hearts. In any case, Ares, as Zeus's son, was also the highest-ranking wealthy and handsome god on Olympus. If he made the virginity oath, even if these male gods couldn't obtain Aphrodite, they would undoubtedly have one less extremely powerful competitor when pursuing other desired goddesses in the future. Seeing this group of people casually dismissed by Ares, Aphrodite angrily bit her lower lip, then looked aggrievedly at Zeus, pleading, "Zeus, do I really have to choose a husband today?" Zeus's heart softened at Aphrodite's pitiful appearance, and his attitude also loosened. He replied, "You don't have to choose, but your divine power is truly too special, Aphrodite. If you don't want to find a husband, you can only swear to become a virgin goddess like Athena and Ares. Of course, you don't have to swear to the world, swearing to my lightning is enough." In that case, it wouldn't be impossible for him to open a back door for himself to have affairs later. Zeus was calculating his own scheme, but Aphrodite clearly didn't have the same determination to cut off her own wrist like Athena and Ares. Moreover, her own divine portfolio included sexual desire, so it was impossible for her to completely avoid romantic relationships. However, with her current discerning eye, she only regarded figures who were also among the 12 main gods. But among the 12 main gods, only Hephaestus, the unappealing god of fire, and Hades, the somewhat gloomy lord of the underworld, remained. Just as Aphrodite was hesitating between these two options, she suddenly heard the voice of the new moon goddess Artemis in her ear. "Zeus, were the words you just said true?" The gods followed the sound and looked towards its source, seeing the white-haired moon goddess in a moon-white long dress, pulling the beautiful and majestic goddess of the hearth, Hestia, both coming before Zeus. "Artemis, Hestia, what is this?" Zeus looked at these two ancestors before him with some confusion. The two beautiful goddesses exchanged a smile, then Hestia softly said to Zeus, "Actually, during this time, we have also been troubled by issues in this regard. After just seeing Athena's and Ares's oaths, Artemis and I both feel this is a very good solution. So, Zeus, let Artemis and me swear to your lightning, we also want to be virgin goddesses." Chapter 23, Chapter 23 The Four Virgin Brothers. Unlike Athena, Zeus had no improper thoughts about Artemis, nor was he wary of this daughter who cared nothing for power all day long. He merely saw her as a lovely daughter. In fact, Zeus truly didn't need to be wary of Artemis, as the moon goddess had no interest in the position of god-king to begin with. For her, the position of god-king, which required managing all things in heaven and earth, might even be a bother, as it would delay her hunting. Therefore, putting aside all other factors, Artemis was actually Zeus's most beloved daughter. As for Hestia, there's even less to say. As the eldest sister among the third-generation gods, she possessed the dignity of an elder sister even in front of the three god kings. Even Poseidon, who had always harbored improper thoughts about her, could only behave like a proper younger brother in front of Hestia. Therefore, at the strong insistence of his most beloved daughter and most respected elder sister, Zeus had no choice but to agree. The two goddesses swore by the lightning in his hand and officially became virgin goddesses under Zeus's protection. With their delay, Aphrodite's thoughts on choosing a husband were interrupted again. The jealous Hera seized the opportunity to suggest to Zeus that Aphrodite be married to Hephaestus, their most skilled son. Under the combined pressure of the god king and the queen of heaven, the goddess of love and beauty had no choice but to comply, holding her nose and marrying the god of fire, whom she considered ugly. After all, after Ares swore to become a virgin god, Hephaestus was the only one Aphrodite could choose. Choosing this god of fire, at least she could still enjoy the prosperity of the gods on Olympus. When the mortal realm prospered in the future, she would have plenty of opportunities to seek out other handsome men and rendezvous with them. If she had followed Hades to the underworld, it would likely become quite difficult for Aphrodite to run around freely. In fact, if she married Hades, she probably wouldn't dare to casually cheat. This gaunt king of the underworld looked honest, but his status as one of the three god kings was not false. The gods of Olympus all believed that the king of the underworld, who controlled death, was even more terrifying than Poseidon, who controlled the ocean. Thus, after Aphrodite nodded in agreement, the god of love and the overjoyed god of fire immediately began their wedding ceremony at the feast of the gods, witnessed by Zeus and Hera, becoming husband and wife. Look at them, how happily they're laughing. Ares held his wine glass and said to Athena, Artemis, and Hestia beside him. Athena glanced at him upon hearing this, then said, Yes, truly happy. Aphrodite's expression right now looks like she's attending a funeral. What kind of talk is that? Ares looked at Athena with displeasure. You, the esteemed goddess of wisdom, how can you curse people? I'm just stating the facts, Athena said coldly to Ares. And don't talk to me so intimately. Our relationship isn't that close. Alas, Athena, that's where you're wrong. Hestia, who was beside them, frowned slightly upon hearing Athena's words. You and Ares are both Zeus's children, and siblings. Moreover, you two are the two most powerful gods among the fourth-generation gods. Since that's the case, you should get along well and set an example for your other brothers and sisters. Exactly, Ares echoed. Athena, although our battle isn't over yet, we are all virgin gods now. You, I, Artemis, and Hestia, I think the four of us should come up with a group name. What do you think of the four virgin sisters? After he finished speaking, he laughed heartily, patting the goddess of wisdom's back forcefully, making Athena's back thump loudly. What kind of ridiculous name is that? Athena endured Ares's vulgar actions with great effort while patiently retorting. Then how about the four virgin brothers? Athena felt her brain veins were about to burst. She covered her forehead and excused herself to Hestia, Sorry, Hestia, I think I need to go rest for a bit. Okay, go ahead. Seeing that Athena's mental state was very poor at the moment, Hestia didn't force the goddess any further. After the three watched the goddess of wisdom rub her temples and walk away, Ares also excused himself to Artemis and Hestia, then retreated alone to a corner of the banquet hall, eating while watching Hephaestus and Aphrodite's wedding. Why don't you try to persuade your honest brother? As he was watching, the moon goddess's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Ares turned his head and found Hecate had appeared out of nowhere again. She held a glass of wine, and her makeup, which had been smudged from laughing because of Ares, had also been touched up in her spare time. I did persuade him, Ares shrugged at his magic teacher. But he didn't listen. How did you persuade him? Hecate asked, looking at Hephaestus, whose face was beaming with happiness and who was completely immersed in Aphrodite's charm. The shaded path you yearn for may be covered in white frost every night and morning in the future, Ares sighed. After I said that, he got very angry and sent me back. Although it sounds poetic, upon closer thought, it's quite deserving of a beating, Hecate mused. If anyone said that to me at my wedding, I'd definitely beat him too. But I was speaking the truth. Ares gestured towards Aphrodite with his chin. Look at her deadpan face. Who would believe she won't cheat in the future? Hecate glanced at Aphrodite. At that instant, Ares saw a flicker of magical light in her eyes. Then, she looked at the god of fire with a somewhat pitiful gaze, such an honest man, truly tragic. Seeing her reaction, Ares's eyes lit up, and he asked, "What was that just now?" "Foresight. A type of magic that imitates a magic eye," Hecate replied. "I just briefly imitated clairvoyance, which has future-seeing abilities, and looked at this god of fire's future." "Teacher, I want to learn this," Ares said, bowing his head sincerely. "You're still a bit lacking in skill. When your magical cultivation reaches a certain level, it won't be too late for me to teach you," Hecate rolled her eyes. "Moreover, this future sight is not omniscient. Even true future sight only observes the most likely future at the moment. However, based on the choices of different individuals and the development of different situations, the future is constantly changing. Even the world's will cannot fully control this." "Is that so?" Ares was a little disappointed, but he quickly perked up. According to the information he had just gathered from various gods, Prometheus and Athena should soon begin creating humans on Earth at Zeus's command. At that time, he would also need to plan the magic he would need for this. So he asked. "Then, teacher, do you have any magic that allows one's spirit to be sustenance into another body?" Chapter 24, Chapter 24 Hecate's Favor. Whether it was deliberately acting as a trailblazer, feigning defeat to Athena in a duel, or studying magic with Hecate and swearing an oath of eternal chastity to the entire world, Ares's ultimate goal was always to survive. And the most secure way to survive, besides directly escaping this world, was to hide his true body and operate through created avatars. Hecate, as the moon goddess of Greece, must have known something about this technique. Moreover, according to Ares's memories, in the later era of depleted great sources, there was still a high-ranking puppeteer known as the Scarlet of Pain who used a similar method to replace his flesh body with a puppet and prepared many backup bodies, thereby gaining the characteristic of being difficult to kill completely. Ares didn't need any of that, he only needed a few shells that could hide his true self while being manipulated by his spirit. Indeed, after he proactively inquired, Hecate merely pondered for a moment before agreeing, "Very well, it's about time you researched some of your own magic. I have indeed studied this area, and I will teach you when we return." Thus, after Hephaestus and Aphrodite's wedding, and Ares presented a gift to his elder brother, Hecate, and Ares left Olympus and returned to the tree palace on the shores of Okeanos. Because Zeus was recently preparing to create all things, his desertion of duty as the god of war went unquestioned by other gods on Olympus. Zeus was even hoping Ares would behave himself during this period and not cause chaos on the land, saving him trouble. According to Hecate's estimation, besides this reason, the gods of Olympus didn't question Ares's whereabouts, probably because Ares's oath was truly too shocking to the divine hearts. However, none of this concerned Ares. Upon returning to the tree palace, he immediately devoted all his energy to studying life-saving magic with Hecate. During this process, he also didn't neglect his study of spatial temporal magic. If one day he could successfully analyze the black crystal and escape this world, then he wouldn't need to force himself to learn magic that was already like advanced mathematics, causing him headaches. Thus, another period of time passed. During this time, Ares had completely mastered the spiritual attachment magic taught by Hecate, and he had even innovatively modified this magic to be more convenient. He had also fully learned puppet magic. However, the current Ares did not know the process by which Prometheus and Athena created humans, so he could not create a human body for himself. He could only first use some rare materials from the earth to create a disguised divine body slightly inferior to his own, and then inject his divine power and spirit into it, using it as his true form to be revealed to the outside world. His true self continued to stay in Hecate's tree palace library. Recently, he had gradually shifted his energy towards this crystal. Through Hecate's magic and Hephaestus's material identification techniques, he had also made significant achievements in the analysis of the black crystal. Through analysis, Ares discovered that this crystal was a substance born outside this world. Although he had not fully grasped all its properties, Ares had tested that it could absorb ether and convert it into its own energy. When it had enough energy, it could penetrate the spatial-temporal barrier, taking surrounding objects with it to travel through space-time to other universes. And now, this black crystal had been filled with energy by him using a spiritual pulse on the Earth, ready for a second spatial-temporal travel experiment at any time. However, how to find a suitable experimental site was a big problem. In today's world, the sky, the earth, the underworld, and the sea all have their masters. If Ares were to conduct experiments so brazenly in these places, he would likely be detected by Zeus and other god kings. In the age of gods, the god king's authorities were almost insurmountable. Apart from extraterrestrial beings like Yuxing Vanguard and Deus Ex Machina, the only ones who could defeat a god king were their own destinies, which were vaguely predetermined. If Zeus were to discover him engaging in these covert actions, it would be fine if Ares could truly escape with this black crystal. But if he couldn't, he would probably be in Tartarus tomorrow morning, bearing heavy chains with his grandfather, second uncle, third uncle, and other titans, enduring eternal torment. After much thought, Ares still couldn't think of anywhere in this world where he could safely test the power of this crystal. However, his concerns seemed to have been seen through by the moon goddess. Just as Ares was deep in thought, sketching the prototype of a secret magic laboratory that no one could discover on papyrus, Hecate suddenly called him out. "I'm taking you somewhere today," the moon goddess said, raising her hand to open a transfer gate. "Follow me." Ares didn't understand her meaning, but the moon goddess had already changed forms and walked in first. Considering that the moon goddess had no conflict of interest with him and should not harm him, Ares thought for a moment and then threw in one of his own false bodies. Although Hecate was his mentor, Ares currently lacked trust in all the gods of Greece. He would not actively harm Hecate, but while one should not harbor malicious intentions, one should also not be without caution. His relationship with Hecate was close now, but they had not reached the point of confiding in each other, so Ares decided to play it safe for now. After controlling the divine body he had created to pass through the transfer gate, Ares found himself in the deepest part of the underworld. Above was a sky made of rocks and grey mist, and on the ground were only endless rocks and sand, with countless biological skeletons buried within the sand. There was no sign of life here. In the distance, in the deep darkness of this area, one could still see a river burning with flames. Surrounding the river was a towering copper wall, and beneath the wall, giants with 100 arms could be seen patrolling back and forth. That was the bronze prison where the Titans were confined, and this land, naturally, was the terrifying hell beneath the earth, Tartarus. Ares withdrew his gaze from the distance and looked at the purple-haired goddess standing gracefully before him with her arms crossed. Hecate could naturally discern the authenticity of Ares's body, but she wasn't angry, she merely let out a disdainful snort from her nostrils. "Look at you, and you call yourself the god of war." "I'm just following my true self." Ares spread his hands openly, saying, "Teacher, why did you call me here?" Hecate maintained her posture of standing with crossed arms, turned around, and lifted her chin towards a spot behind her where there was a stone palace. "There, my secret laboratory. Here, you will definitely not be discovered by Zeus, Hades, or Poseidon. Whatever magic experiment you want to do it quickly. Stop making that miserable face all day, writing and drawing in my palace, wasting my paper." Seeing Ares's surprised expression, Hecate added, "I saw through your thoughts long ago. Don't worry, I said before that as long as you swear not to oppose me, I won't care what you want to do. Use this laboratory yourself, and come out after you've finished your experiments. I won't watch you. Hecate. A complex expression appeared on Ares's face. When he first arrived here, all he thought about was how to escape his future destiny, so he hadn't considered other factors. Even when building good relationships with Hephaestus, Apollo, Artemis, and others, he always carried a layer of caution in his heart. For these Greek gods whose values were so different from his own, Ares naturally felt that they were not on the same path. However, Hecate's actions truly made Ares's heart waver a bit. The moon goddess clearly saw that Ares was secretly making small moves, but she still helped him conceal them and had no intention of questioning him about them. Don't worry. So Ares solemnly swore to Hecate, I, Ares, swear to the world that I will never be an enemy of the moon goddess Hecate. Also, I will remember your kindness, and if you are ever on the verge of death in the future, I will find a way to help you. Humph. Hearing Ares's oath, Hecate couldn't help but laugh. Do you even know who the teacher is? Do I need you to save me? Little brat. Chapter 25, Chapter 25 Treasures from Another Time and Space. Hecate's laboratory was indeed absolutely secret. In the deepest part of this Tartarus, even the king Zeus could not detect it, and the original great god who once gave birth to this Tartarus had already abandoned his autonomous consciousness under the impetus of the suppression, completely merging with this Tartarus, transforming into an absolute forbidden zone in Greece. The only ones who could possibly detect this stone temple were the 100-armed giants and the Furies wandering outside the bronze prison in the distance, but the temple also had countless barriers set up by Hecate, which completely cut off their senses. So, after accepting Hecate's favor, Ares quickly gathered the items he needed for his experiment and moved into the stone temple established by the moon goddess in Tartarus. Ares had already fully prepared for the experiment of the black crystal traversing the universe. All he lacked was a safe venue. With Hecate providing her laboratory, everything was ready, and Ares immediately began the experiment. He drew a huge spell formation he had woven on the ground, held the fully charged black crystal in his hand, and then simultaneously injected the last trace of divine power to activate them into the spell formation beneath his feet and the crystal in his hand. Buzz! The strange spell formation on the ground lit up, and the black crystal in Ares's hand also began to heat up and glow. He opened his palm, and the black crystal in his palm floated up on its own. Detected activation energy, confirmed authorization, detected intelligent entity, detected presence of nearby intelligent entity, confirmed permissions, confirmation complete, one supreme permission holder, multiverse intelligent navigation system at your service. So it can talk, Ares said, surprised, looking at the black crystal upon hearing the sudden voice in his mind. When he had examined this black crystal, he hadn't discovered that it was an intelligent system. However, if this black crystal was equipped with such a thing, then it would indeed be much simpler for him to operate, at least better than the previous situation where he was completely in the dark. Moreover, it sounded like, for some unknown reason, he had also inadvertently obtained the supreme operational authority within this black crystal, which made things much more convenient. So he tried to communicate with this black crystal using his mental power, sending his desires to it. Checking permission holder's input command confirmed, filtering eligible universes, filtering complete, inter-universe fast travel channel about to open. After the black crystal's voice faded, a peculiar energy beam projected from the crystal, striking the air. Immediately, the space there seemed to indent as if pressed down hard, then produced voids and cracks, and slowly formed a teleportation channel leading to other spaces. It worked. Seeing the slowly appearing channel, Ares was overjoyed. However, just as he had slung his pack over his shoulder and was about to jump in, he suddenly felt a terrifying power in the unseen lock onto his location. Then, the spatial channel that had just formed in midair disappeared rapidly, like a pencil mark erased from white paper, leaving only a black crystal pendant still suspended in the air. Upon seeing this result, not only Ares was stunned, but the activated black crystal also remained suspended in the air, as if it too were stunned. At the same time, a terrible premonition emerged from the depths of his soul, carrying a warning. Was that the suppression? By the time this warning slowly faded in his mind, Ares was drenched in a cold sweat, feeling somewhat unnerved. However, Ares being afraid did not mean this black crystal was afraid. A navigation system capable of freely traversing the multiverse would, no matter how one thought about it, not be afraid of a tiny suppression of a planet within one universe. So, as if with a hint of defiance, the black crystal's voice continued. Channel suffered unknown interference, opening failed. Activating backup plan, intercepting items that meet the permission holder's filtering criteria for reverse transmission. After speaking, Ares saw the black crystal suspended in mid-air seemingly seize the moment of the suppression's retreat, suddenly opening another small black hole. Then, a dazzling blue electric light shot out from that small hole, striking his forehead. This electric light poured into his mind, shaking his soul, and scenes like a revolving lantern suddenly appeared before Ares's eyes. Fight your mother! Overlord, Overlord, Overlord! Invincible Shock Zen! Whale slaying Overlord Fist! Damn it, magnetic field